What if Harry Potter wasn't only the boy who lived, but the son of Alucard himself? In this dark alternate universe, Harry doesn't just inherit magic. He inherits hunger, shadows, blood power, and the terrifying legacy of the No-Life King. But the real question is not how powerful Harry becomes. It's whether he can choose not to become the monster everyone fears. I've divided this story into 6 chapters, showing Harry's awakening from a strange child at Privet Drive to a predator who refuses to feed. So before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And let's enter the bloodline of the night.
The No-Life Lineage chapter won the Goblet's Blood Memory London in 1978, smelled of rain, petrol, and restless youth. Lily Evans had always liked that about the city. Hogwarts smelled of stone and wax and ancient dust, as though every corridor had been holding its breath since the founders. London did not hold its breath. London exhaled, smoke from buses, steam from gutter grates, perfume and spilled beer outside theater doors, newspapers damp in the hands of men rushing home. Neon signs reflected in puddles like broken spells. She had graduated from Hogwarts 3 months ago. The war had already begun to narrow the world. Not officially, perhaps. The ministry still issued statements with careful phrases like isolated incidents and heightened security concerns. The prophet still printed photographs of Quidditch stars above reports of missing Muggle-born families. Pure blood students still laughed too loudly in Diagon Alley, pretending their fathers were not whispering names behind closed doors. But Lily had eyes. She had seen the way people lowered their voices when you know who was mentioned. She had watched James Potter grow serious in ways that did not suit him, as if some invisible hand kept reaching into his chest and turning down the brightness. She had seen Sirius Black smile with all his teeth and no warmth behind it. She had heard Remus Lupin ask questions no young man should know how to ask, and she had decided, quite stubbornly, that she would not spend her 20s hiding. So on a wet October evening, Lily Evans went to the theater alone. It was a small place in Soho, old enough to have velvet seats that scratched the back of her legs and chandeliers that looked as if they had survived both wars out of pure arrogance. The play was mediocre. The actors were good enough to make it feel important while it was happening, and forgettable enough that Lily knew she would not remember the plot by morning. Still, she stayed until the end. Outside, the rain had become a silver curtain. People crowded beneath the awning, laughing and complaining. Lily pulled her coat tighter and reached into her pocket for her wand, intending to cast a discreet warming charm once she was around the corner. That was when she noticed the man who did not blink. He stood at the edge of the awning, half in the rain, half in shadow. Tall. Too tall, perhaps, though not unnaturally so. He wore a long, dark coat despite the wet, and his hair was black enough to swallow the theater lights. His face looked neither old nor young. That was the first thing that unsettled her. He had the features of a man who could have been 30 or 50, or painted from memory by someone who had once seen a king die. He was looking at the rain, not watching it fall, studying it, as if each drop were a message from a language he had once known. Lily told herself not to stare. The man turned his head, his eyes met hers. For 1 second, the noise of London fell away. No cabs. No laughing theater patrons. No rain hissing against the pavement. Only a cold, impossible stillness, like standing at the mouth of a cave and realizing something inside had noticed your breathing. Then he smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, simply as if he had found something unexpected and was mildly pleased by it. "You are not afraid," he said. His voice had an accent Lily could not place. Not foreign exactly, older than foreign. Like English was a coat he had put on because the weather required it. Lily raised an eyebrow. "Should I be?" The smile widened by a fraction. Most men, Lily had learned, disliked being challenged. This one seemed to find it refreshing. "That depends," he said, "on whether you value caution. I value information more. Then you are young, and you are rude." At that he laughed. It was not a loud laugh. It did not draw attention from the crowd, but Lily felt it in her bones the way one felt distant thunder before the storm actually arrived. The man stepped fully beneath the awning. Rainwater slid from his coat and vanished before it reached the floor. Lily noticed. So did he. His eyes flicked to her wand pocket. "A witch," he said. "A scholar," she returned, remembering the program in his hand. Briefly. Briefly a scholar, briefly awake. There were many sensible things Lily could have done then. She could have walked away. She could have taken out her wand. She could have sent a patroness to James or Dumbledore or anyone with more experience dealing with men who spoke like riddles and made the air feel thin. Instead, she did what had always gotten her into trouble. She asked a question. "Who are you?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he bowed his head, not deeply, but with the faint courtesy of an age that had remembered manners before it remembered mercy. "Vlad," he said, "for tonight." Lily should have laughed. No one introduced themselves like that unless they were either mad, dangerous, or acting in a play that had gone on too long. But he said it with such plainness that laughing would have felt foolish. "For tonight?" she asked. "All names are temporary." "That sounds lonely." Something moved across his face then, not pain, not quite recognition, perhaps. "You are very young," he said again, but softer this time. Lily looked out at the rain. "People keep saying that lately, because they mistake youth for ignorance. And you don't. I have known ancient fools." She smiled despite herself. "That sounds like the beginning of a very long story. All good stories are warnings. Then maybe people tell them wrong." Vlad watched her. For the first time, Lily saw something beneath the calm, a hunger, yes, but not the simple hunger of a predator. It was deeper than that, stranger. A hunger that had eaten everything offered to it and found itself still empty. She should have been afraid, some small part of her was, but Lily Evans had spent her life being told what she was supposed to fear. Muggles feared magic. Pure bloods feared Muggle-borns. The Ministry feared truth. Death Eaters feared equality. Everyone feared death. Fear, she had decided, was not always wisdom. Sometimes it was only habit, so she stayed beneath the theater awning while the crowd thinned and London blurred around them. She spoke with the man called Vlad about books and history and the arrogance of men who thought immortality meant victory. He spoke of castles and battlefields without naming them. He described kings as if he had met too many to be impressed. He called magic a young language, and did not seem to mean it as an insult. At some point the rain stopped. At some point Lily forgot she had meant to go home. At some point he looked at her as though the world had shifted slightly beneath his feet. "You look at me," he said, "as if I am only a man." Lily tilted her head. "Are you not?" For the first time that evening his smile looked almost sad. "No, then what are you?" The theater lights flickered. Across the street, a drunk man stumbled, cursed, and kept walking. A cat emerged from beneath a parked car, saw Vlad, and froze, not frightened, not angry. It simply lowered itself to the wet pavement and watched. Vlad extended one hand. His glove was black. "I am what waits," he said. "When men make monsters and then pray monsters will obey them." Lily looked at his hand. She did not take it, not yet. Instead, she asked, "And do you?" "Do I what?" "Obey." His eyes darkened. "No." "Good," Lily said. "Obedient monsters are the worst kind." That was the moment, though Lily did not know it then, not romance, not seduction, not the foolishness of a girl charmed by danger, something older. A recognition between two impossible things. A man who had become a monster because the world demanded it, and a woman who would one day stand unarmed before death and tell it no. Vlad's hand lowered. "You should go home, Lily Evans." She stiffened. "I didn't tell you my name." "No." "Then how?" "Blood remembers what mouths do not say." The words should have chilled her. They did, but he did not move closer. He did not threaten. He did not command. He only looked at her with something that might, in another creature, have been wonder. "I will sleep again soon," he said. "This world has too much noise." "Then why wake at all?" He looked toward the east, where dawn was still hours away. "Because once in a century," he said, "something interesting happens." Lily did not know what to say to that, so she said the simplest thing. "Good night, Vlad." His smile returned, faint and unreadable. "Good night, Lily Evans." She walked away first. She felt his gaze on her until she turned the corner. When she reached the small flat she shared with two other Order sympathizers, Lily found a single drop of silver on her palm. Not rain, not blood exactly. Something between. It sank into her skin before she could wipe it away. For 3 nights afterward, she dreamed of a red castle on a cliff above a black sea. For 3 mornings afterward, she woke with no fear of death at all. By the 4th morning, the dreams were gone. The war resumed its pressure on the world. James made her laugh. Sirius got arrested and released twice in the same week. Petunia sent a letter that contained 4 insults and no return address. Dumbledore looked at Lily once during an Order meeting and frowned as if he had heard music no one else could hear. Life moved forward, but blood, unlike memory, does not forget, and something older than magic waited quietly inside the future. Godric's Hollow in 1981 was too still. That was what Voldemort noticed first. He had expected screaming. He had expected James Potter to fight with desperation and Lily Potter to beg with dignity, because brave people always imagined dignity mattered at the end. He had expected the house to smell of fear, sweat, wand smoke, and infant panic. Instead, after James fell in the hall and Lily stood in the nursery with her arms spread before the crib, the room became still. Not silent, still. There was a difference. Silence was the absence of sound. Stillness was the attention of something waiting beneath sound. Voldemort did not like it. He did not fear it. Lord Voldemort feared nothing. He had remade himself from ambition and bone and rituals older than any ministry law. He had walked further along the path of immortality than any wizard alive. He had split death open and hidden himself in the wound, but he noticed the child in the crib was not crying. Harry Potter stared up at him with wide green eyes. Lily's eyes, Voldemort's lip curled. Stand aside. Lily shook her head, not dramatically, not like a heroine in some childish tale, just once. No, such a small refusal, such a human thing. Voldemort felt contempt rise in him like bile. He had been offered prophecies, wars, followers, fear. He had bent noble houses and ancient institutions around the gravity of his name. And now this muggle-born girl, this temporary creature with red hair and shaking hands, believed her body could alter fate. Stand aside, girl. Not Harry. Her voice broke on the name. The child blinked. For an instant, Voldemort saw something flash in the infant's eyes, not magic. Magic he understood. This was not wand light, nor curse fire, nor the warm shield of sacrificial love that Dumbledore so adored in theory. This was deeper. Redder, older. It looked out from the child as if the flesh were a window, and behind the window something vast had opened one eye. Voldemort's wand hand tightened. Lily moved. The green light struck. Her body fell. The room changed. Later, many would say Lily Potter's love saved her son. They would be correct, but incomplete. Love was the door. Blood was what waited behind it. Voldemort turned his wand on the child. Harry Potter's scar, not yet formed, shone beneath the skin like a thin line of moonlight. The Dark Lord hesitated, only for a fraction of a second. It was enough for the ancient thing inside the infant to notice him. Voldemort heard, not with his ears, but somewhere inside the part of himself he had cut too many times, a sound like distant laughter. Not amused, not kind, mildly contemptuous. As if something ancient had glanced at all his rituals, all his titles, all his terror, and found them childish. Rage burned away caution. Avada Kedavra, the curse struck Harry Potter. It should have ended him. Instead, it reached for the child's soul and found the blood seal. For the first time in his life, Voldemort felt something bite back. Not defend, bite. The killing curse shattered against Harry's essence and rebounded with a violence that was not light but hunger wearing the shape of light. Voldemort had time to feel his soul tear, not cleanly, not like cloth. Like glass already cracked by his own hands, finally struck in the perfect place. The room vanished, the body vanished. The world became a scream, and through it all Voldemort felt the gaze again, something immense, something awake just long enough to judge him. Little wizard, it seemed to say. Then everything broke. Harry Potter did cry then. The sound filled the ruined nursery. Outside, the house split open to the night. Wind moved through broken walls. Dust settled on Lily's hair. James lay still below. The Dark Lord was gone, and in the crib, the child's lightning scar bled silver. Not much, only a single line, bright as a knife beneath moonlight. It dried before Hagrid arrived. It faded before Dumbledore saw him. But when Dumbledore lifted Harry Potter from the wreckage hours later, the old wizard paused. The infant looked at him. Most babies looked through people. Harry looked at him. Dumbledore felt, very briefly, as though he stood at the edge of a deep well and something at the bottom had chosen not to climb. "My dear boy," Dumbledore whispered. Harry's tiny fingers closed around the old man's beard. The grip was stronger than it should have been. Dumbledore smiled, because Dumbledore had always believed in signs. Then the child released him. By morning, Harry Potter was left on a doorstep in Surrey. By morning, the wizarding world had begun turning him into a symbol. By morning, the thing in his blood was asleep again. But not as deeply as before. Privet Drive did not believe in monsters. That was one of its many mistakes. Number 4 was a clean house on a clean street where lawns were bullied into obedience and curtains twitched with military discipline. Vernon Dursley believed in drills, invoices, normal boys, and the importance of being louder than anyone who disagreed with him. Petunia Dursley believed in bleach, gossip, and the power of pretending the past had never happened. Dudley believed in cake. None of them believed in monsters. And yet every person in that house had known, from the first week Harry Potter arrived, that something was wrong. Petunia noticed it first, not because she was kind, because she was afraid. The baby did not cry properly. He cried when hungry, yes, or cold or uncomfortable, but there was no panic in it. Other babies wailed as if the world ending was a personal betrayal. Harry cried like a creature announcing a problem it expected someone to solve. When Petunia leaned over his cot, he would stop crying and stare. Green eyes, Lily's eyes, but not Lily's gaze. Lily had looked at Petunia with anger, hurt, sometimes pity, and worst of all, understanding. Harry looked at Petunia as though he were learning her. As though every heartbeat, every swallow, every tightening of her jaw had been filed away somewhere in that infant mind. "Don't look at me like that," she whispered once. Harry blinked. Petunia stepped back so quickly she struck the wall. Vernon noticed later. He noticed when Harry was 3 and a neighbor's dog slipped its lead, charging across the pavement toward Dudley with barking fury. Everyone shouted. Dudley screamed. Vernon raised one beefy arm as if he could punch a dog into manners. Harry, standing barefoot on the lawn, turned his head. The dog stopped, mid-charge, its paws skidded on the pavement. Its bark died in its throat. For several seconds it stared at Harry with its head low and ears flat. Then it walked to him, slow and trembling, and pressed its muzzle against his knee. Harry patted it once. "Good dog," he said. The dog lay down. Vernon returned it to the neighbor without speaking. That evening he locked Harry in the cupboard for the first time, not as punishment, not really. Punishment suggested the belief that behavior could be corrected. Vernon locked the cupboard because doors made him feel safer. By the time Harry was 7, the Dursleys had built an entire household religion around not looking too closely at him. They called him freak. They called him ungrateful. They called him boy. They told themselves he was strange because Lily had been strange and James had been worse, and that was all there was to it. They ignored the way shadows seemed thicker around his cupboard door. They ignored the fact that spiders did not frighten him, but gathered near him quietly, like small worshippers. They ignored how he could wake from sleep and know exactly who was standing outside the door before they touched the handle. They ignored the silver sheen that sometimes flashed beneath his skin when he was ill. Most of all, they ignored the way Harry never seemed surprised by cruelty. He disliked it. He did not understand why it pleased them, but surprise, no. Some buried instinct in him had always known the world was full of teeth. Harry grew small, thin, watchful, and polite in the way children become polite when politeness is armor. He learned not to ask questions. He learned not to complain. He learned that hunger was a thing one could fold neatly and place behind the ribs. He also learned that he could hear things other people could not. At first, he thought everyone knew the language of heartbeats. Aunt Petunia's was quick and sharp, like a bird trapped in a chimney. Uncle Vernon's was heavy, damp, and angry. Dudley's was loud and simple. Teachers had different heartbeats. Children had messy ones full of sugar and lies. Dogs had honest hearts. Cats had secretive ones. Snakes, when he met them, were calm in a way that made him feel less alone. By age 9, Harry knew when someone was afraid of him before they spoke. He did not know how he knew. He only knew fear had a scent. Iron and salt. Aunt Petunia carried it whenever she opened his cupboard. Uncle Vernon carried it whenever Harry stood too still. Dudley did not carry it until they were 10, during a game of Harry hunting that ended badly. Dudley had chased him behind the school bins with Piers Polkiss and 2 other boys. Harry had tripped, scraping both palms on gravel. Blood welled dark on his skin. The boys laughed. Then the blood moved. Only a little. A thin thread sliding back toward the cut as if pulled by an invisible needle. Harry saw it. So did Dudley. For one heartbeat, all 5 boys froze. Then Harry clenched his fists and the blood disappeared beneath his skin. Dudley wet himself. No one ever mentioned it again. But after that, Dudley stopped chasing Harry when no adults were watching. He still shoved him, still mocked him, still took his food. But he never again cornered Harry where no one else could see. Predators, even spoiled ones, understood certain boundaries. The summer Harry turned 11, the letters began. The first one landed on the doormat like a judgment. Harry saw it before Uncle Vernon did. The envelope was thick, yellowish, addressed in green ink to Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. For a long moment, Harry only stared. Something in his chest tightened. Not hope. Hope was too fragile a word. Recognition. As if some part of him had been waiting for a summons written by a hand it had never seen. Uncle Vernon snatched the letter before Harry could touch it. The house erupted. There were shouted questions, burnt envelopes, boarded letterboxes, and finally the ridiculous journey to the hut on the rock, where Uncle Vernon believed isolation could protect him from whatever world had finally remembered Harry existed. That night, rain hammered the windows. The sea crashed black against the rocks. Dudley snored on the sofa. Uncle Vernon sat with his gun across his knees, sweating through his mustache. Aunt Petunia stared at nothing, lips moving silently, perhaps praying to a god she had ignored for years. Harry lay on the floor beneath a thin blanket, listening to the storm. Then he heard something else, not outside, inside the glass. He turned his head. The window reflected the room in broken shapes, Vernon's bulk, Petunia's sharp silhouette, Dudley's lump under blankets, and Harry, thin face. Messy hair, green eyes. Except for 1 second, the reflection's eyes were gone, not closed, gone. 2 spaces of perfect darkness looked back at him from his own face. Harry did not scream, he did not move. The thing in the window watched him with patient curiosity. Harry stared back. A whisper passed through the room, too soft for anyone else to hear. Not words. A feeling soon, then lightning flashed. The reflection was normal again. Harry sat awake until midnight. At exactly 12 o'clock, the door exploded inward. Rubeus Hagrid entered Harry's life with a pink umbrella, a birthday cake, and the smell of wet wool, earth, kindness, and something large enough to stand between a child and the dark. Harry liked him immediately, not because Hagrid explained magic, not because Hagrid brought food. Because Hagrid was not afraid, shocked, yes, angry on Harry's behalf. Clumsy with emotion and too loud for the small hut, but not afraid. When Hagrid looked at Harry, he did not see prey. He did not see predator. He saw a boy. For reasons Harry could not explain, that mattered more than the letter. Diagon Alley was sunlight on glass and gold beneath stone. Harry should have been overwhelmed by the magic. He was, a little, but not in the way Hagrid expected. The shops were bright. The owls were loud. Children tugged at parents' sleeves. Cauldrons flashed in pyramids of brass and pewter. Robes swept past. Wands hummed in windows. Goblins watched from counters with ancient dislike. Harry noticed all of it, But beneath the color and wonder, he noticed blood, not spilled blood, living blood. Hundreds of people moving through narrow streets, each carrying warmth beneath the skin, each heartbeat a small drum calling to something below Harry's thoughts. He pressed one hand into his pocket. "You all right, Harry?" Hagrid asked. "Yeah," Harry said. It was not a lie, not exactly. Gringotts unsettled him. The goblins smelled of metal, ink, and old bargains. They looked at Harry with more interest than he liked. One goblin behind the counter paused while weighing a stack of coins, nostrils flaring. "Potter," the goblin said. Hagrid beamed. "That's right, Harry Potter." The goblin did not smile. His eyes flicked to Harry's scar, then lower, to his hands, to the pulse at his throat. "Blood accounts are deep things," the goblin murmured. "What was that?" Hagrid asked, nothing of concern to wizards. Harry looked at the goblin looked back. For an instant, something like respect passed between them. Then the moment was gone. At Ollivander's, the old wandmaker took one look at Harry and went very still. "Curious," he whispered. Harry had learned to dislike that word. Ollivander moved around him like a man approaching a sleeping lion. "Your mother's wand was good for charm work. Your father's, excellent for transfiguration. But you," he placed a tape measure in the air. It began measuring Harry by itself, though Harry had the uncomfortable impression the tape was afraid to touch him. One wand after another failed, some sparked. Some went cold. One turned black from tip to handle before Ollivander snatched it away with a hiss. Finally, he brought out a narrow box from a high shelf. "Holly," he said quietly. 11 inches. Phoenix feather, supple." Harry took the wand, warmth rushed into his hand. For a moment, the shop filled with red and gold light. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like borrowing a language he had once heard through a wall, beautiful, powerful, not his. Ollivander watched him with shining eyes. "The wand chooses the wizard." Harry looked down at the Holly wand. Deep inside him, something older than wizardry shifted and settled again. "Yeah," Harry said softly. "I suppose it does." Ollivander's smile trembled. Platform 9 3/4 roared with steam. Parents kissed children goodbye. Owls hooted. Trunks scraped over stone. The scarlet train waited like a promise made of iron. Harry stood near the barrier with his second-hand trunk, a new wand hidden inside his robes. For the first time in his life, he was surrounded by people who looked at his scar before they looked at him. Whispers followed. "Harry Potter. That's him. Look there." He hated it immediately, not because they knew his name, because they thought they knew what it meant. To them, he was a story, a miracle, a symbol. The boy who lived. None of them knew about the cupboard. None of them knew about the dog kneeling in the street. None of them knew about the window reflection with no eyes. None of them knew that when Harry stepped onto the train and walked down the corridor, he was not looking for fame, friendship, or destiny. He was listening. Every compartment had its own rhythm, nervous first years, bored older students, a girl lecturing someone about spell damage, twins with identical heartbeats and different mischief, a blond boy speaking too loudly, his pulse quick with inherited arrogance, a red-haired boy alone in one compartment, eating something from a paper bag and trying not to look worried. Harry paused outside that door. The boy looked up. For 1 second his heartbeat jumped, then steadied, not fear, curiosity. "Anyone sitting there?" Harry asked. The red-haired boy shook his head. "No, go on." Harry entered. He chose the seat by the window. Sunlight fell across his face, warm, weak, ordinary. Outside, the platform blurred with steam and waving hands. The train lurched forward. Harry Potter watched London slide away, one heartbeat at a time. He did not know what he was. Not yet. He only knew there was something inside him that listened when others were afraid. Something that woke when blood was spilled. Something that had looked out through his reflection and promised soon. Harry pressed his palm against the window, where the sunlight touched his skin. For now, it was enough. For now, he was only a boy going to school. Behind him, his shadow stretched across the compartment floor. For half a second, it opened its eyes. Chapter 2. The sorting and the smell of blood. The Hogwarts Express carried Harry Potter north beneath a sky the color of old pewter. For most children aboard, the journey was an escape. They changed into robes too early. They traded chocolate frog cards. They leaned out of compartments to compare families, houses, brooms, and rumors. Their excitement warmed the train until every carriage felt overfull with sound. Harry sat by the window and listened, not to the words. Words were easy to misunderstand. People used them like curtains. They pulled them across windows and pretended no one could see inside. Heartbeats were cleaner. Ron Weasley's heartbeat, for example, was nervous but honest. It jumped when the trolley witch arrived. It sped up when he talked about his brothers. It stumbled whenever he mentioned money, robes, or hand-me-down things, then recovered with forced cheer. Ron was embarrassed by poverty but not poisoned by it. That mattered, though Harry did not yet have the language for why. "You're really Harry Potter?" Ron asked after nearly an hour of trying not to. Harry looked away from the window. Ron flushed bright red. "Sorry, I didn't mean it like that." "Like what?" "Like," Ron waved helplessly. "Like everyone does." Harry considered that. Outside, fields unrolled beneath the rain. Inside, the compartment smelled of sweets, old upholstery, rat fur, and Ron's anxious sincerity. "I don't know what everyone means when they say it," Harry said. Ron blinked. "You don't?" "No, but you know what happened, right?" "My parents died." "Voldemort didn't." "Then he did, sort of." Ron flinched at the name. His heartbeat spiked hard enough that Harry heard it like a drum hit. Harry tilted his head. "You're afraid of the name. Everyone is. I'm not." Ron stared at him. That silence was different from the Dursleys' silence. Theirs had always been full of calculations. How to punish, how to deny, how to stay safe. Ron's was simply the silence of a boy realizing the person across from him did not understand a rule everyone else had been born obeying. Then Ron grinned, uncertain but real. "That's mental." Harry smiled a little. He liked Ron then, not because Ron was brave, not yet, because Ron was frightened and had not made that fear someone else's problem. A knock came at the compartment door. A round-faced boy looked in, eyes wet with panic. "Sorry, but have you seen a toad? Neville's lost one." Beside him stood a girl with bushy brown hair and the posture of someone who had entered the world already prepared to correct it. "We've already checked 3 carriages," she said. "You should tell me at once if you've seen it." Ron looked offended. "We haven't." The girl's eyes moved to Harry's scar. Everyone's did. But hers did not linger there. Instead, they moved across his face, his posture, the way his hand rested lightly near the wand pocket in his robes, though he had not yet learned enough magic to justify the habit. Harry felt himself being observed, not worshipped, not judged, studied. "Are you Harry Potter?" she asked. "Yes, I've read about you." "I haven't." That seemed to interrupt whatever speech she had prepared. Ron snorted. The girl frowned at him, then looked back at Harry. "I'm Hermione Granger. And you should probably know everyone is talking about you." "I noticed." "Doesn't that bother you?" Harry looked at her for a moment. Her heartbeat was quick but controlled, curious, not afraid, not exactly. Hermione Granger carried fear differently. She did not run from unknown things. She made lists of them. "Yes," Harry said finally, Hermione's expression softened by a fraction. "Well," she said, recovering herself, "if I were you, I'd read Hogwarts, a history. It has an entire section on famous magical events, though some of it is terribly vague." "I'll do that." Ron looked betrayed. "Don't encourage her." Hermione gave him a look of magnificent offense and continued down the corridor with Neville trailing after her. When the door closed, Ron leaned back. "She's a nightmare." Harry watched through the glass as Hermione passed the compartment again, still searching. "No," he said. "She's prepared." Ron made a face. "Same thing sometimes." Harry looked back out the window. His reflection stared faintly from the glass. For once, the eyes were his own. Hogwarts appeared after dark. That was its first kindness. If Harry had seen it in daylight, perhaps it would have looked like a school. Grand, yes. Impressive, certainly. But still built of stone and windows and towers. At night, across the Black Lake, Hogwarts looked less like a building and more like a memory the world had forgotten how to erase. Torches burned along battlements. Towers rose into mist. The lake reflected the castle in broken gold, as if something beneath the water were dreaming of fire. The first years crossed in small boats. Harry sat with Ron, Hermione, and Neville. The lake was very still, too still. Harry rested his fingers against the side of the boat and felt, far below, something massive shift in the cold water, not close, not threatening. Aware, he pulled his hand back. Hermione noticed. "Are you all right?" "Yes, you went pale. I'm always pale." Ron laughed. Hermione did not. She looked down at Harry's hand, then at the lake. The castle doors opened before she could ask anything else. Professor McGonagall led them inside with the severity of a woman who had survived generations of children and still believed in order as an act of moral courage. Harry liked her immediately. Her heartbeat was disciplined, strong. She was not afraid of the students, the castle, or the future. She carried worry, yes, but beneath it was iron. The first years were brought to a chamber outside the great hall. Around Harry, children whispered about the sorting. "What do you think it is?" "Fred said we have to fight a troll." "Shut up, we do not." "My brother said they test your magic." Ron had gone slightly green. Harry listened through the wall. The great hall beyond it was full. Hundreds of heartbeats. Hundreds of bodies. The smell reached him before the doors opened. Iron, salt, warm skin, candle wax, old stone, fear, want, ambition, jealousy, loneliness, hunger. Not hunger like his own, if it even was his own. Human hunger was scattered and loud. Hunger for attention, hunger for family, hunger for praise, hunger for victory, hunger to belong, hunger to be seen, hunger to be feared. 1,000 children and teachers sat inside the hall, and all of them wanted something. Harry swayed. Ron caught his sleeve. "Harry, I'm fine. You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine." Ron let go, not because he believed him. Because friends, Harry would later learn, sometimes began as people who let you keep your lie until you were ready to give it up. The doors opened. The great hall was impossible. The ceiling showed the night sky. Floating candles drifted overhead. 4 long tables stretched beneath banners of red, green, blue, and yellow. At the far end sat the teachers, and at the center of them, beneath a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles, was Albus Dumbledore. Harry felt the old wizard's gaze immediately, not because Dumbledore stared. He did not. He looked warmly over the students, smiling as though the world were a puzzle he trusted would solve itself in time. But for one breath, his eyes touched Harry's scar, and Harry felt something behind them sharpen. Dumbledore knew something. Harry did not know what. That made him dangerous. The Sorting Hat sang. Harry barely heard the words. He was too busy listening to the room. Draco Malfoy's heartbeat was easy to identify even before his name was called. Fast, proud, brittle. A boy raised to believe cruelty was inheritance and fear was respect. When the hat shouted Slytherin, almost before touching his head, Draco smirked as though destiny had confirmed his worth. Hermione Granger trembled when she sat on the stool. Not visibly, perhaps, but Harry could hear it. Her heart pounded with desperate discipline. She wanted the hat to choose correctly because she had spent her whole young life believing correct answers could protect her. "Gryffindor?" Ron relaxed beside Harry. "Thank Merlin," he muttered. Names passed. Neville Longbottom almost took the hat with him after being sorted. Laughter rippled across the hall. Neville's heartbeat collapsed inward. Harry disliked the laughter. He did not know Neville. Still, something in him disliked how quickly a room could become teeth. Then Professor McGonagall called, "Potter, Harry." The hall changed. It did not go silent all at once. It folded into silence. Whispers died row by row. Heads turned. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the scar beneath Harry's hair. He walked to the stool. Every step sounded too loud when he sat. The hat dropped over his eyes, smelling of dust, age, and old decisions. A voice spoke in his mind. Hum. Then stopped. Harry waited. The hat did not continue. 12 seconds passed. In the great hall, the silence began to rot into discomfort. Inside Harry's head, something stared at the Sorting Hat. And the Sorting Hat, which had looked into brave minds, cruel minds, brilliant minds, broken minds, cowardly minds, and minds twisted by ambition, found itself looking into a place where the categories did not apply. There was courage, yes, but not the simple courage of charging into danger. There was ambition too, though not the ambition to rule. There was cunning, sharpened by survival. There was loyalty, still young, still suspicious, but real. And beneath all of it lay a question the hat had never been forced to answer. What do you do with a child whose mind does not divide the world into enemy and friend, but into prey and protected? The hat trembled. Harry felt it. Interesting, the hat whispered at last, though its voice had lost its usual confidence. Very interesting. You are not what they think you are. No, Harry thought back, surprising himself. You do not know what you are either. No, power under the skin, hunger behind the heart. And yet you choose windows, sunlight, boys with honest fear, girls with sharp questions. Harry did not answer, not Slytherin, the hat murmured. Not because you lack darkness. No, there is darkness enough, but Slytherin would teach you to justify appetite as destiny. Then where? The hat was quiet for one final second. Then it shouted, Gryffindor! The red and gold table erupted. Harry pulled off the hat and handed it back. As he walked toward Gryffindor, he felt Dumbledore watching him again. This time Harry looked back. The old wizard smiled. Harry did not. Hogwarts was not like Privet Drive, that made it better. It was also not safe, that made it honest. Harry learned the castle in layers. During the day it was staircases and classrooms, portraits and ghosts, books and bells. At night when the other boys slept, it became something older. Pipes whispered inside walls. Shadows pooled beneath doors. Armor shifted when no one looked. The castle breathed in stone. Harry liked it. Sometimes he thought it liked him back. His classes were a strange disappointment. Not because magic was dull. Magic was astonishing. Hermione was right about that, loudly and often. Even Ron, who had grown up with it, could not fully hide his pride when he explained moving photographs or wizard chess or the proper way to avoid biting teacups. But wand magic felt wrong in Harry's hand. He could do it. That was the strange part. He learned spells quickly enough when he concentrated. He could cast Lumos by the third lesson, unlock simple charms, levitate a feather after Hermione corrected Ron's pronunciation so dramatically that the whole table remembered it forever. But every spell felt translated. Other children reached outward when they cast. Magic flowed from them through the wand, shaped by words and movement. Harry felt as though he were picking up a tool made for someone else's fingers. Useful, elegant, borrowed. The holly wand liked him. That was undeniable. But something inside him did not like the wand back. It tolerated it. Like a chained wolf tolerating a collar because the boy holding the leash was gentle. Hermione noticed first. Of course she did. You pause before every spell, she said in November, while they practiced in an empty classroom. Harry lowered his wand. Everyone pauses. No, everyone thinks before casting. You pause like you're asking permission. Ron, sitting on a desk and eating a pumpkin pasty, groaned. Here we go. Hermione ignored him. And your results are odd. My results are fine. They're not fine. They're precise, but cold. Ron frowned. How can a spell be cold? When Harry levitates something, it doesn't wobble like ours. It just rises, like it's been ordered to. Harry looked at the feather floating in front of him. It did hang strangely still. You're making that sound bad, he said. I'm making it sound unusual. With you, that usually means bad. Hermione opened her mouth, then closed it. Her heartbeat shifted, not fear, concern. I don't think you're bad, Harry. The words landed harder than he expected. Ron looked between them, suddenly uncomfortable. Harry flicked his wand. The feather dropped. I know. Hermione's expression said she did not believe he did, but she let the matter rest, for now. Draco Malfoy lasted longer than Harry expected. The first insult came on the train. The second came after the sorting. By Christmas, Draco had built himself a small throne out of sneers, money, and two large boys named Crabbe and Goyle, who followed him with the loyal stupidity of guard dogs trained by cowards. Most of Draco's insults slid off Harry without effort. Potter was famous. Potter was poor. Potter was friends with blood traitors. Potter had no proper upbringing. Potter should be careful who he stood near. Harry understood what Draco was doing. He had seen Dudley do the same thing in smaller, uglier ways. Draco wanted the world arranged with himself at the top. Any evidence otherwise offended him. Ron hated him openly. Hermione dismissed him with such clean contempt that Draco often looked more wounded than insulted. Harry mostly watched. That annoyed Draco most of all. Cruelty expected reaction. When denied one, it became insecure. The incident happened after Quidditch practice. Harry had made Seeker, which caused enough outrage to feed Draco for weeks. It was late afternoon, the sky washed orange and gold, sunlight lying low over the pitch. Harry's vampiric inheritance, though he did not know to call it that, was quiet in daylight. His senses remained sharp, but the deeper shadows in him slept under the sun's weight. Perhaps that was why Draco dared it. Harry was walking back toward the changing rooms with his broom over one shoulder when Draco stepped into his path. Crabbe and Goyle stood behind him. Ron was still putting away equipment. Hermione had not come to watch practice because she claimed Quidditch was a fascinating example of cultural irrationality, and then refused to explain whether that meant she liked it. "So," Draco said, "training hard, Potter, trying to prove mud can fly." Harry stopped. The word was not aimed at him, not exactly, but he heard what Draco meant. Muggle-born Hermione, Lily. The air changed. The sun was still up. The pitch was still bright. Students still laughed near the stands. But Harry's shadow lengthened across the grass. Draco saw it. His mouth kept moving because boys like Draco often mistook momentum for courage. "My father says your mother was lucky, really?" Dying before she could see what kind of Harry looked at him. That was all. No wand, no spell, no movement, just eye contact. Draco Malfoy stopped speaking. For 3 seconds he saw something. Harry did not know what. Draco did. He saw a battlefield beneath a red moon. He saw a castle with its gates open and no living men inside. He saw himself small, pale, and screaming in a room where every shadow had teeth. He saw a throne made not of gold, but of silence. And on it, something wearing Harry Potter's face looked down at him with no anger at all, only appetite. Then the vision ended. Draco staggered backward. Crabbe caught him. Goyle made a confused noise. Harry blinked. The world returned. Draco's face had gone the color of parchment. His heartbeat was not fast anymore. It was wild, broken, animal. Harry took one step toward him. Draco flinched so violently that Crabbe nearly dropped him. Harry stopped. Whatever anger had risen in him vanished, replaced by a sick, cold confusion. "I didn't do anything," he said. Draco did not answer. He could not. He did not speak for the rest of the day. After that, Draco did not bully Harry again. He did not become good. Fear rarely made people good. But he became careful. He aimed his cruelty elsewhere where the shadows did not look back. Harry hated that more. Christmas came and brought with it snow, gifts, and the invisibility cloak. The cloak unsettled him, not because it was powerful, because it felt familiar. Harry stood before the mirror in the empty classroom, wearing the cloak over his shoulders, watching his body vanish beneath it. The cloak did not hide his shadow, not completely. On the floor, where nothing should have been, darkness clung in a thin outline around his feet. Harry stared at it. The shadow twitched. He removed the cloak. The outline disappeared. Later that night, he found the mirror of Arised. His parents stood behind him in the glass. James Potter had messy hair and a smile like he had never learned caution properly. Lily Potter looked exactly like Harry had imagined, and nothing like he was prepared for. Her eyes were his. No, his were hers. That difference mattered. Harry touched the mirror. His reflection did not lose its eyes this time. Instead, behind Lily and James, at the very back of the reflected room, stood a man in a long red coat. Harry turned around. The room was empty. When he looked back, the man was gone. Only Lily remained, watching him with such fierce sadness that Harry had to leave before something in his chest broke open. Dumbledore found him on the 3rd night. He spoke gently about desire, dreams, and the danger of living in reflections. Harry listened. Then he asked, "Did you know my mother?" Dumbledore's face softened. "Yes, she was extraordinarily brave." "Was she afraid of things?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Everyone is afraid of things, Harry." Harry looked back at the mirror. "Not everyone." Dumbledore said nothing for a moment, then softly, "Those who fear nothing are often the ones most in need of saving." Harry did not understand why that made him angry, so he said nothing. Queeriness Quirrell smelled wrong. Harry noticed it before the scar pain became unbearable. The professor smelled of garlic, nerves, old cloth, and something dead pretending badly to be alive. Everyone assumed the stutter was weakness. Harry thought it sounded more like a door being held closed from the other side. The first time Quirrell passed Harry in the corridor, Harry's scar burned. Quirrell stumbled. For half a second, his turban twitched. Harry heard a second heartbeat. No, not heartbeat. Something trying to remember how a heartbeat sounded. Harry froze. Quirrell hurried away. That night, Harry dreamed of a pale face drinking darkness from the back of a man's skull. When the final confrontation came beneath the trapdoor, Harry understood almost nothing and sensed almost everything. The obstacles were strange but survivable. Devil's snare recoiled from Hermione's fire. Ron sacrificed himself brilliantly on the chessboard, his heartbeat steady even as the Stone Queen struck him down. Hermione solved the potion riddle with trembling hands and bright eyes. "You're a great wizard, Harry," she said. "I'm not." "You are." "No," he said. "I'm something else." Hermione went very still for one moment. Harry almost told her not the truth. He did not know the truth, but the shape of it, the heartbeat language, the shadows, Draco's face on the pitch, the reflection, the cold wrongness inside his wand work. Then the flames waited and Ron was hurt and the stone was ahead, so Harry only said, "Get Ron!" Hermione looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she hugged him. It was quick, fierce, and unexpected. Harry froze. Hermione pulled back, embarrassed. "Don't die." "I'll try." "That is not a satisfactory answer." Despite everything, Harry smiled. Then he stepped through the black fire. Quirrell waited in the final chamber. So did the mirror, so did Voldemort. Harry knew the voice before Quirrell turned. High. Cold, furious. Empty, a voice built around fear of ending. The turban fell. The face on the back of Quirrell's head opened its red eyes. Harry's scar screamed. But beneath the pain, something in Harry's blood lifted its head. Voldemort looked at Harry. Harry looked back. The Dark Lord's expression changed, only slightly, recognition without understanding. "You!" Voldemort whispered. Harry's fingers twitched near his wand. The wand felt distant, useless, borrowed. The room smelled of old stone, panic, and Quirrell's dying body. "Give me the stone," Voldemort said. No, such a small refusal, such a human thing. Quirrell lunged. Harry did not cast. He grabbed Quirrell's wrist. The reaction was immediate. Quirrell screamed. Smoke rose from his skin, not from fire, from contact. From Harry's blood rejecting the thing inside Quirrell with such violent disgust that even Voldemort shrieked. Harry should have let go. He did not. Something inside him tightened around the moment. Quirrell struck him. Harry fell, rolled, and came up with both hands out. Quirrell grabbed his face. The world became pain, then hunger answered. Harry seized Quirrell's head and held on. He felt the professor's life under his palms. Weak, frightened, almost gone already. He felt Voldemort behind it, a parasite clinging to the last warm thing in the room. The blood seal reacted. Quirrell burned. Voldemort screamed. Harry's scar split open. For one terrible second, Harry understood how easy it would be to pull, not push, not defend. Pull, to take the thing inside Quirrell. To drink the stolen life. To drag Voldemort's broken remnant into the dark under his ribs and close his teeth around it. The thought filled him with horror, not because it was alien, because it was not. Harry released Quirrell and stumbled backward. Quirrell collapsed. The spirit of Voldemort tore free in a shriek of hate and shadow, passing through Harry like winter through glass. Harry fell. As consciousness left him, he saw Dumbledore entering the chamber. The old wizard looked at Quirrell's body, then at Harry. Then, for the briefest instant, at Harry's blood on the stone. It shone silver. Dumbledore's face went very still. Harry woke in the hospital wing to sunlight. That helped. The curtains were open. Morning lay across the bed in clean gold bars. His body felt bruised, feverish, and oddly hollow. Madame Pomfrey fussed. Ron and Hermione visited. Ron had a bandage around his head and the proud expression of someone trying very hard not to look injured. "You look awful," he said. "So do you." Yeah, but I was attacked by chess. What's your excuse? Bad teacher. Ron grinned. Hermione did not. She stood at the foot of Harry's bed with her hands clasped too tightly. You touched him, she said. Harry looked at her. Ron's grin faded. Hermione's voice stayed calm through sheer effort. Professor Quirrell, you touched him and his skin burned. He was possessed. That is not an explanation. It's the one Dumbledore gave. I didn't ask Dumbledore. Ron shifted. Hermione, no. She looked at Ron, then back at Harry. Something is happening to him. You've seen it too. Ron opened his mouth, closed it. His heartbeat betrayed him. He had seen the pitch, the corridors. The way Harry sometimes turned before people entered rooms. The way animals watched him. The way shadows near Harry's bed did not always fall correctly. Harry waited for Ron to deny it. Ron did not. That choice lodged itself somewhere deep in Harry. Hermione took a breath. I'm not accusing you. You sound like you are. I'm frightened. Harry looked down. There it was, honest, no disgust, no worship, no pretending, just fear, and she had chosen to say it instead of hide behind it. I am too, Harry said. Hermione's eyes filled suddenly with tears, which seemed to annoy her. Ron looked stricken. Harry wanted to say something comforting. Nothing came. So they sat together in the hospital wing while sunlight crept slowly across the floor. For a while, that was enough. The end of Harry's first year arrived wrapped in applause and secrets. Gryffindor won the House Cup. Dumbledore made a speech. Everyone cheered. Harry smiled when Ron shouted himself hoarse, and Hermione clapped with shining eyes. But when Harry looked toward the staff table, he found Dumbledore watching him again. The old wizard's face was kind. His eyes were not. His eyes were calculating. Harry looked away first, not because he was afraid, because he wanted badly to keep liking him. The train ride home was easier than the first. Ron complained about going back to the burrow because his brothers would never let him forget the chessboard. Hermione gave both boys reading lists for the summer, color-coded by urgency. Neville proudly showed them a chocolate frog card he had managed not to lose. Harry sat by the window. The sunlight touched his hands. Normal hands, thin, pale, scarred from childhood accidents and cupboard splinters, not claws, not yet. He wondered why the words not yet came so easily. At King's Cross, the Dursleys waited with faces like a funeral procession had been forced to collect an inconvenience. Uncle Vernon looked at Harry's trunk. Aunt Petunia looked at Harry's face. Dudley did not look at him at all. Ron leaned close. You're right. Yeah, Harry nodded. Hermione gave him a look sharp enough to pin him in place. And if anything unusual happens, you'll tell us. Harry almost laughed. My entire life is unusual. Then tell us if it becomes more unusual. I will. She knew he was lying. He knew she knew. That was becoming its own kind of friendship. The Dursleys took him home. The cupboard was locked. The rules returned, but something had changed. Not in the house, in Harry. Privet Drive felt smaller now, not safer. Not kinder, smaller, like a cage he had outgrown without realizing. That summer Harry dreamed, not every night. Only when the heat was heavy and the moon was thin. He dreamed of a red castle on a cliff above a black sea. The castle windows burned with warm yellow light. The waves below struck the rocks with the patience of centuries. Somewhere inside, doors opened and closed though no living hand touched them. On the third dream, Harry found himself standing in a long hall lined with portraits whose faces had been scratched away. At the end of the hall stood a man. Tall, black hair, long red coat. He looked out a window at the storm beyond the cliff, one gloved hand resting on the stone. Harry knew him. That was impossible. Harry knew him anyway. The man turned. His eyes were red, not like Voldemort's. Voldemort's eyes were red because he had cut away everything human and filled the emptiness with power. This man's eyes were red like old wine, old wounds, and old banners carried through wars no one alive remembered. He looked at Harry without surprise, as if he had been waiting for this moment since before Harry's birth. You're awake, the man said. Harry wanted to ask who he was. He wanted to ask what was happening. He wanted to ask why the sight of him made something in Harry's chest ache with recognition and warning both. But the dream began to collapse. The castle stretched. The sea rose. The man's smile showed too many teeth. "Not enough," he said softly, "but awake." Harry woke in his cupboard with his nails dug into the floorboards. Outside, Uncle Vernon snored. Inside the cupboard, the shadows watched him. Harry stared back until dawn. Chapter 3. A hunger no potion can sate. Summer at Privet Drive became quieter after Harry's first year. Not kinder, never kinder, but quieter. The Dursleys had learned, in the way frightened animals learn, that certain forms of cruelty were safer than others. Vernon still shouted. Petunia still locked away food when she thought Harry had eaten too much. Dudley still made ugly faces from across the table and whispered insults whenever his parents weren't watching. But no one shoved Harry into corners anymore. No one grabbed his wrist unless they had to. No one opened the cupboard door too quickly. Harry noticed these things. He hated that he noticed. Fear had a smell, and number 4 Privet Drive was soaked in it. It clung to the wallpaper. It sat beneath the smell of Petunia's cleaning products. It pulsed under Vernon's skin whenever Harry looked at him too long. Even Dudley carried it now, sour and thick, though he tried to bury it under bluster and chocolate. Harry had spent most of his childhood wanting them to be afraid. Now that they were, it brought him no comfort. Fear did not make them better. It only made them careful, and careful cruelty was often worse. He spent long hours in his room after Vernon finally gave him Dudley's second bedroom, not out of generosity, but because the cupboard had started making everyone uncomfortable. Shadows gathered there even when the door was open. Petunia refused to clean it. Dudley refused to walk past it at night. Harry's new room had bars on the window. That was almost funny. He had survived Quirrell, Voldemort, the mirror, the stone, and something in his own blood that had wanted to pull a dying man apart by the soul. But Vernon Dursley still believed iron bars could solve him. Harry sat beneath the barred window and tried to write to Ron and Hermione. The problem was that he did not know what to say. "Dear Ron, the shadows in my room move when I'm angry." "No, dear Hermione, you were right. Something is happening to me too much." "Dear both, I dreamed of the Red Castle again. Impossible." So he wrote ordinary things. He wrote that the Dursleys were horrible. He wrote that he missed Hogwarts. He wrote that he had been doing his homework in secret. He did not write about waking at 3 in the morning with the taste of iron in his mouth. He did not write about the way his reflection sometimes lagged half a second behind him. He did not write about the hunger, not yet, because it was small. That was what he told himself. Small things could be ignored. A strange thirst after nightmares, a fascination with the pulse in his own wrist. A moment at dinner when Vernon sliced his thumb cutting roast beef, and Harry heard the blood hit the plate like thunder. Small things, manageable things, human things if one did not look too closely. Then Dobby arrived. The house elf appeared on Harry's bed with enormous eyes, shaking hands, and terror leaking from him so strongly that Harry nearly stepped back. Dobby was afraid of many things, his masters, his own magic, the danger waiting at Hogwarts. But when he looked at Harry, his fear changed. It was not the Dursleys' fear, not prey fear, recognition fear. Dobby stared at Harry as if he had expected to find a boy and discovered a sealed door instead. "Harry Potter must not go back to Hogwarts," Dobby whispered. Harry frowned. "Why?" Dobby trembled. "Terrible things is waiting there, sir." Old things, hungry things. The shadows in the corners of Harry's room stirred. Dobby squeaked and clapped both hands over his mouth. Harry saw it. Dobby saw that Harry saw it. For a moment neither moved. Then Harry said quietly, "What kind of hungry things?" Dobby's ears flattened. "Dobby cannot say." Harry leaned forward. He did not mean to frighten him, but Dobby flinched anyway. The window rattled though there was no wind. Harry sat back at once. "I'm not going to hurt you." Dobby stared at him. Then, in a small voice, he said, "That is what makes Harry Potter different." Before Harry could answer, Dobby vanished. The trouble that followed was almost ordinary by Harry's standards. A ruined dinner, a floating pudding, a ministry warning, bars tightened on his window, and Vernon's face purple with outrage. But that night, locked in his room, Harry stood in the dark and looked at the bars. His anger rose. The shadows rose with it. For one wild second, he imagined the bars bending outward like soft wax. He imagined the door opening. He imagined walking downstairs and watching the Dursleys understand, finally and completely, that their cage had always been pretend. Then he thought of Ron. He thought of Hermione. He thought of sunlight on the Gryffindor table. Harry closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the shadows had settled. The bars remained. The next night, Ron Weasley arrived in a flying car, and for the first time all summer, Harry laughed like a normal boy. Hogwarts in Harry's second year felt changed. Or perhaps Harry was changed enough to hear what had always been there. The castle still groaned and whispered at night. The staircases still shifted. Peeves still caused chaos with the dedication of an artist. The great hall still smelled of food, ink, candles, and too many young lives packed beneath an enchanted sky. But beneath it all, Harry heard something else, a voice, not a human voice, not even a ghost. It moved through the walls in long, cold threads. Rip, tear, kill. The first time he heard it, he froze in the middle of the corridor. Ron walked into him from behind. "Oh, what are you doing?" Harry held up a hand. The voice moved again, so hungry, so long Harry's skin went cold, not because the voice frightened him. Because some part of him understood it, not the words, the hunger beneath them. Hermione saw his face. "Harry," he looked toward the wall, stone, torchlight, tapestry, nothing. "Did you hear that?" Ron frowned. "Hear what?" Hermione went still. Harry did not answer. That became the shape of the year. Harry heard the voice. No one else did. Mrs. Norris was found hanging stiff and petrified from a torch bracket. The message on the wall gleamed red. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware." The school changed overnight. Fear spread through Hogwarts like spilled ink. Muggle-born students moved in groups. Pure-blood students whispered with shining eyes or pale faces, depending on what kind of home had raised them. Teachers patrolled the halls. Filch wept over his cat. Lockhart smiled too brightly and understood nothing. Harry stood before the message and smelled the writing, not paint, blood, old blood mixed with something colder. Hermione noticed him noticing. "You know something," she said later in the library. "I hear something." Ron lowered his voice. "You mean the voice?" Harry nodded. Hermione's face sharpened into concentration. "What does it say?" Harry hesitated. Around them, students turned pages, scratched quills, whispered homework complaints. Ordinary sounds, human sounds. "It says it's hungry." Ron went pale. Hermione did not. Her eyes moved quickly, connecting invisible strings. "And no one else hears it?" "No." Could be a magical creature, something that speaks at a frequency only you can hear, or a language only you understand. Harry thought of the snake at the zoo years ago. He thought of the sorting hat trembling on his head. He thought of Voldemort's voice in the chamber beneath the school, cold and broken and familiar in ways he hated. Maybe. Hermione leaned closer. "Harry, has this happened before?" Harry looked away. That was answer enough. Ron swallowed. "Mate, I don't know what it means." "No one said you did." Hermione said nothing for a while. Then she opened a new book. "Then we find out before someone dies." That was Hermione. Fear turned into research. Ron looked miserable but stayed. That was Ron. Fear turned into loyalty. Harry did not know what his fear turned into. He was starting to worry the answer was hunger. The dueling club should have been ridiculous. In fairness, most of it was. Lockhart wore robes too bright for candlelight and spoke as if every sentence expected applause. Snape stood beside him like a funeral, wearing a man's face. Students crowded around the platform, eager for drama and terrible at hiding it. Harry wanted to leave. Then Draco Malfoy stepped onto the platform. Draco had avoided Harry since the Quidditch pitch incident last year. Not obviously. Draco was too proud for obvious fear. He still sneered near Harry, still made comments about Ron's family and Hermione's blood status, still performed superiority for the Slytherin table. But he never again looked Harry directly in the eyes. Not until Snape paired them. Draco's heartbeat betrayed him, fast, uneven, trapped. Harry almost felt sorry for him, almost. The duel began. Draco cast first. Serpensortia. The snake hit the floor and rose, black and gleaming, fangs bared. Students screamed and backed away. Harry heard the snake's panic before he saw its aggression. It had been ripped from somewhere warm and dropped into noise, light, fear, and hostile motion. It struck because everything looked like threat. Justin Finch Fletchley stumbled near the front. The snake turned toward him. Harry moved without thinking. "Leave him." The words came out wrong. Not English. The corridor of sound inside him shifted, and the snake froze. The entire room went silent. The snake lowered its head. Harry stepped closer. "You're afraid," he said in the same hissing language. "So are they. Don't make fear choose for you." The snake's tongue flickered. Then it folded itself calmly onto the floor. Snape vanished it with a sharp flick of his wand. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then the whispers began. Parseltongue. He's speaking Parseltongue. Slytherin's heir. Harry looked at Ron. Ron looked shocked, but not afraid of him. Hermione looked horrified, but not at Harry, at the room. At what the room had already decided. Draco stood frozen on the platform. This time he did meet Harry's eyes. There was no vision, no shadow, no warning, only Harry, tired and furious and 11 years old. Draco looked away first. The rumors worsened after that. Harry Potter, Parselmouth. Harry Potter, heir of Slytherin. Harry Potter, dark creature. That last phrase did not come from the students at first. It came from a 7th year whose father worked in the department for the regulation and control of magical creatures. He said it laughingly in the courtyard, loud enough for people to hear and pretend not to. Harry did not react. The boys stopped laughing when every crow on the battlements turned to look at him. Harry had not asked them to. That was the problem. More and more, things happened around him when he felt too much. Shadows gathered. Animals stilled. Candles burned lower. His wand work grew worse on days when he was angry, because the thing under his skin pressed against the magic like a hand closing over a candle flame. Sunlight helped. Harry began sitting near windows whenever he could. Hermione noticed that too. She noticed everything. The diary almost fooled him. Almost. Tom Riddle's diary was clever. It knew how to be empty in a way that invited filling. It knew how to listen. It knew how lonely children thought secrets were safer when written down, but Harry touched it and felt hunger, not like the voice in the walls. Not like his own. This hunger was thin, sharp, and desperate. A hunger pretending to be memory. The first time ink wrote back, Harry's scar burned. The second time, the diary showed him Hagrid's supposed crime. The third time, Harry nearly pressed his palm flat to the page and pulled. He did not know what he would have pulled. He only knew the diary had something inside it, something alive enough to be afraid. Then the diary disappeared. Hermione was petrified soon after. That was when Harry stopped pretending the mystery was interesting. Before Hermione, the chamber had been terrifying. After Hermione, it became personal. Harry stood beside her hospital bed and looked at her frozen face. Madame Pomfrey said she was alive. That helped, not enough. Ron stood at Harry's side, pale and silent. Hermione's hand lay on the blanket, fingers slightly curled. In one stiff fist she held a torn piece of paper, basilisk, pipes. Harry read the words. The voice moved somewhere deep beneath the school. "Hungry, hungry," something in Harry answered. Ron touched his sleeve. "Harry." Harry realized the windows had gone dark, not outside, inside the room. Every shadow in the hospital wing had lengthened toward Hermione's bed. Harry forced himself to breathe. The shadows retreated. Ron's hand remained on his sleeve. He was shaking. He did not let go. Harry would remember that for the rest of his life. Ugh. Finding the chamber was almost easy after that. Too easy. As if the castle had been waiting for him to stop asking and start listening. Moaning Myrtle's bathroom smelled of damp stone, old tears, and pipe water. The sink with the tiny snake scratched into its side seemed ordinary until Harry stood before it and opened his mouth. The Parseltongue came easier this time. "Open!" The sink moved. Ron swore. Lockhart tried to flee and failed. The tunnel below breathed cold air into Harry's face. It smelled of stone, rot, snake, and something ancient enough that even Hogwarts felt young beside it. They descended. Lockhart's memory charm backfired. The tunnel collapsed. Ron was trapped on one side with a dazed Lockhart. Harry stood on the other, alone, of course, he thought, not bitterly. Only with a strange tiredness. The final path led him downward. The chamber of secrets opened before him like the throat of some buried god. Pillars carved with serpents rose into darkness. Water lay black over stone. At the far end stood the statue of Salazar Slytherin, its face ancient, severe, and hungry with the arrogance of bloodline obsession. Ginny Weasley lay at its feet, small, pale, dying one heartbeat at a time. Tom Riddle stood beside her, smiling. Harry knew at once that he was looking at Voldemort. Not as he had been beneath Quirrell's turban, not ruined, not parasitic, young, handsome, bright-eyed with cruelty that had not yet learned to hide behind grandeur. "You," Harry said. Riddle smiled wider. "Me!" The diary lay near Ginny's hand. Harry understood then, not completely, but enough. "You're feeding on her." Such an ugly word. Accurate one. Riddle's eyes narrowed with irritation. He talked after that. Villains, Harry was learning, often did. Riddle spoke of heritage, greatness, Slytherin, immortality. He spoke of names like they were weapons and blood like it was proof. He spoke of death with contempt, the way cowards spoke of things they had never dared to face honestly. Harry listened. Not because he cared, because every second Riddle talked was another second Ginny's heart kept beating. Then Fawkes arrived in a burst of flame and phoenix song. For one beautiful moment, the chamber felt warmer. The Sorting Hat fell at Harry's feet. Riddle laughed. The statue's mouth opened. The basilisk emerged. Harry had seen danger before. This was older. The basilisk was enormous, but size was not what made it terrible. It moved with the slow certainty of a creature that had never needed to hurry. Its scales scraped stone. Venom dripped from fangs longer than Harry's arm. Even blind after Fawkes struck its eyes, it filled the chamber with a presence so vast that Harry felt his own blood go still in recognition. King of serpents, monster of Slytherin, ancient hunger in flesh, Harry ran. The fight was chaos. Stone shattered near him. Water sprayed. Fawkes screamed overhead. Riddle shouted commands in Parseltongue, and the basilisk obeyed with blind fury. Harry reached into the hat and found the sword. Silver flashed in the chamber's green gloom. The basilisk struck. Harry drove the sword upward. The blade entered the roof of the creature's mouth. The basilisk convulsed. One fang sank deep into Harry's arm. Pain exploded white through his body. The basilisk collapsed. Harry fell with it. The sword clattered away. The fang remained buried in his flesh. Venom entered his blood. For 40 seconds, Harry Potter died incorrectly. His heart stopped first, then restarted, then stopped again. The venom spread, seeking organs, nerves, endings. It was made to kill. It carried ancient serpent magic, dark and pure and absolute. It found Harry's blood and attacked. Harry's blood woke, not gently, not like a flower opening, like a locked army hearing the gates break. The venom should have destroyed him. Instead, his body began to catalog it. Every drop, every burning thread, every killing intention. The blood seal inside him cracked wider than it had since Godric's Hollow. Silver spread beneath his skin in branching lines. His shadow stretched across the chamber floor and rose slightly as if it had become liquid and was deciding what shape to take. Harry's eyes opened. For 1 second they were not green, they were red. Riddle stopped smiling. "What are you?" he whispered. Harry did not answer. He could not. He was too hungry, not stomach hunger, not thirst. This was deeper, a need beneath language, beneath thought, beneath morality. The basilisk's death filled the chamber like a feast. Ginny's fading life flickered nearby like candle flame. Riddle's diary pulsed with stolen soul stuff. Everything in the room had blood or memory or power. Everything could be taken. Harry rose unsteadily. The fangs slid from his arm and hit the stone. The wound did not close, it changed. Blood rose from it in thin silver red threads, curling through the air like smoke underwater. Riddle stepped back. For the first time in either of his lives, Tom Riddle looked at Harry Potter and felt the primitive insult of being lower on the food chain. Fawkes landed beside Harry. Phoenix tears fell onto the wound. They hissed, not because they harmed him, because they were not healing a normal injury. The tears cooled the venom, slowed the awakening. Reminded the body what shape it was supposed to keep. Harry gasped. His eyes turned green again. The hunger did not leave. It only became bearable. Harry looked at the diary. Riddle lunged too late. Harry picked up the basilisk fang. His hand shook. Not from weakness, from restraint. He drove the fang into the diary. Ink burst outward. Riddle screamed. But Harry felt more than the destruction. He felt the soul fragment tear. He felt it unravel. He felt it brush against his blood like a black spark begging to be consumed. For one horrifying moment, Harry wanted to take it, to pull it inside, to make the broken piece of Voldemort part of the darkness beneath his ribs. Instead, he twisted the fang deeper. The diary died. Tom Riddle vanished. Ginny breathed. Harry dropped to his knees. The chamber went quiet. Then the hunger returned. Slow, patient, certain. The hospital wing smelled too alive. That was the first thing Harry noticed when he woke. Not potions, not clean sheets, not Madame Pomfrey's brisk movements. Blood, everywhere, in Ron standing beside the bed, in Ginny sleeping 3 beds over, in Madame Pomfrey muttering near the cabinet. In the students beyond the walls, in the castle, in himself. Harry turned his face toward the window. Sunlight lay across the bed. It helped, not enough. Ron noticed before anyone. "You all right?" Harry almost laughed. No, Ron's face tightened. Good, Harry thought bitterly. Honest answer. Hermione would be proud. Madame Pomfrey gave him nutrition potions, strengthening drafts, blood-replenishing tonics, pepper-up, sleeping drafts. Nothing touched the hunger. It was not starvation of the body. It was inheritance making its first clear demand. That evening, Hermione came back. Petrification left her stiff and exhausted, but she marched into the hospital wing like she had personally defeated death by being annoyed at it. Ron nearly knocked over a chair hugging her. Harry stayed, seated on the bed because he did not trust himself to move too quickly. Hermione looked at him once, her happiness shifted into focus. "There," she said. Ron blinked. "There what?" "That look, that's new." Harry closed his eyes. "Can we not?" "No," Hermione said gently. "We can." Ron looked between them. Harry's throat felt dry. Hermione pulled the privacy curtains around the bed. Then she took a stack of parchment from inside her robes. Ron stared. "You brought notes." "I was petrified, Ronald, not dead. I had time to think afterward. You were unconscious." I caught up. Despite everything, Harry smiled faintly. Hermione sat at the foot of the bed. "I need you to tell us what happened after the basilisk bit you." Harry looked at Ron. Ron's face was pale, but he nodded. So Harry told them, not all at once, not dramatically. He told them in pieces. The venom, the silver lines, the blood moving, Riddle's fear, the hunger. The way the diary's soul fragment had felt like something he could swallow. Ron went very quiet. Hermione's quill stopped moving halfway through. When Harry finished, the silence sat with them. Ron was the first to speak. "You didn't." Harry looked at him. "You said you wanted to? But you didn't. That's not as comforting as you think." Ron swallowed. "It is to me." Harry's chest hurt. Hermione looked down at her notes. "I've been researching since last year." Ron blinked. "Since last year? Obviously, since last year. Obviously." Hermione ignored him. "There are references to Dampiers in old wizarding texts, but most of them are useless. Folklore, prejudice, wild exaggeration. Half-vampire children supposedly have enhanced senses, irregular magical signatures, unusual blood properties, sometimes resistance to certain curses." Harry's hands tightened in the sheets. "Half-vampire." "I don't know," Hermione said quickly. "It may not be exact. You don't match most accounts. You can walk in sunlight. You eat normal food. You use a wand. Your reflection exists most of the time." Ron's voice went thin. "Most of the time?" Harry said nothing. Hermione continued, softer now. "But the blood-craving fits." Harry looked away. Ron stood very still. There it was, the thing none of them wanted to name. "I'm not going to hurt anyone," Harry said. Too quickly, Hermione's face softened. "We know." "You don't." Ron flinched. Harry hated himself for that. Hermione folded her notes carefully. "Then we make a system." "A system?" "Yes, rules, sources, warning signs. We don't wait for a crisis and then panic." Ron nodded slowly, seizing on the practicality like a rope. "Right, yeah, rules are good." Harry stared at them. "You're planning this?" "We're your friends," Hermione said. Ron shoved his hands in his pockets. "Bit late to run now, mate." His voice shook, but he stayed. That was the moment the Golden Trio survived, not because fear vanished, because fear remained and loyalty chose to stand beside it. Hagrid solved the problem with almost insulting simplicity. "Blood," he said, as if Hermione had asked for extra pumpkin juice. Hermione went red. "Animal blood, not for anything dark. Harry needs, I know what ye mean." Harry looked up sharply. Hagrid's beetle-black eyes softened. "Creatures are creatures, Harry. Some need meat. Some need moonlight. Some need things polite folk don't like talking about. Doesn't make 'em evil." Ron looked deeply relieved. Hermione looked as if she might cry. Harry stared at Hagrid. "You're not afraid?" Hagrid snorted. "Oh, nah. You should be. Maybe." Hagrid leaned back in his enormous chair. "But I've known monsters, Harry. Real ones. Most of 'em wore human faces and thought being cruel made 'em strong." Harry said nothing. Hagrid stood and went to a cold storage cupboard near the back of the hut. "Got some from the forest. Injured deer last night. Poor thing didn't make it. Waste not, I say." He returned with a sealed container. Harry's entire body went still. The smell struck him. Warmth remembered. Life ended, but not yet empty. His fingers dug into his knees. Ron shifted, but did not move away. Hermione watched closely, not with disgust, but with the fierce attention of someone ready to help or stop him, whichever love required. Harry drank. It was not pleasant. That was a mercy. It did not feel like ecstasy or corruption or any dramatic thing from horror stories. It tasted metallic, thick and wild. The hunger eased, not vanished. Eased, Harry lowered the container with shaking hands. Hagrid nodded once, as if this were no stranger than feeding a hippogriff. "There now." Harry wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and felt shame burn hotter than the hunger. Hermione handed him a cloth. Ron looked at the floor, then deliberately looked back up. "All right?" Ron asked. Harry took a breath. For the first time in weeks, breathing did not hurt. "Better." Ron nodded. "Good. Just that. Good." Harry would have preferred horror. Horror would have been easier to defend against. Kindness left him nowhere to hide. Dumbledore knew by morning. Of course he did. Harry was summoned to the headmaster's office after breakfast. The gargoyle opened for him before he gave the password. Inside, Fawkes sat on his perch, bright and solemn. Dumbledore stood by the window. Sunlight turned his silver beard almost white. "Harry," he said warmly. "Lemon drop." "No, thank you." The old wizard sighed faintly, as if declining sweets were one of youth's tragic errors. Harry remained standing. Dumbledore watched him over half-moon spectacles. "How are you feeling?" "Hungry." The word landed between them. Fawkes shifted on his perch. Dumbledore's expression did not change, but his heartbeat did. Harry heard it. A single misstep. "Then control." "I see," Dumbledore said. "Do you?" The question was sharper than Harry intended. Dumbledore turned fully from the window. "I suspect more than I know." "You knew something before." The office became very quiet. Portraits pretended to sleep. Fawkes watched them both. Dumbledore folded his hands. "I knew there was something unusual about the protection your mother left you." "My mother?" "Yes. Not my father." The question came from somewhere Harry had not expected. Dumbledore's face softened with something that might have been pity. "James loved you very much." "That's not what I asked." For the first time, Dumbledore looked old, not weak, old. Burdened by knowledge he had mistaken for wisdom so many times that he could no longer tell the difference. "No," Dumbledore said quietly. "Not James." Harry's pulse slowed. Some part of him had known, some part had always known there was another shadow behind the story. "What am I?" Dumbledore looked at Fawkes. The Phoenix gave no answer. "I do not yet know enough to tell you safely." Harry laughed once. It was not a pleasant sound. "Safely for who?" Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the kindness was still there, so was the calculation. "That is a fair question." Harry wanted to be angry. He was angry, but underneath it, worse, he was disappointed. He had wanted Dumbledore to be the adult who knew everything and chose honesty anyway. Instead, he was another adult choosing silence and calling it protection. "You won't tell the Ministry," Harry said. It was not a question. "No." "Why?" "Because they would fear first and understand never." Harry thought of the words from the courtyard, dark creature. Are they wrong? Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. Yes, he said with sudden force. If they call you a creature before they remember you are a child, they are wrong. Harry wanted that to be enough. It almost was, but then Dumbledore added gently, "However, Harry, you must understand the importance of restraint." There it was, the leash. Harry touched the wand in his pocket. "I do. I believe you wish to." "That's not the same." "No," Dumbledore admitted. "It is not." Neither spoke for a while. Then Dumbledore said, "You have friends that may matter more than any answer I could give today." Harry looked toward the door. Ron and Hermione were probably waiting somewhere nearby, pretending not to wait. "It does," Harry said. Then he left. Behind him, Dumbledore remained by the window until long after the footsteps faded. Only then did he sit at his desk. He took out parchment. He wrote one line. To Alucard his hand stopped. The ink dried. Fawkes gave a soft, questioning trill. Dumbledore stared at the name. Then he touched his wand to the parchment and burned it to ash. That night, Harry went into the Forbidden Forest alone. It was a stupid thing to do, he knew that. Knowing did not stop him. The castle was too full of heartbeats, too full of whispers, too full of fear wearing student faces and teacher robes. The forest, dangerous as it was, felt cleaner. Predators did not pretend to be anything else. Moonlight fell through the trees. Harry walked until Hogwarts was only a glow behind him. Then he stopped. The forest stopped with him. Insects quieted, leaves stilled. Something approached through the trees, hooves on earth. A centaur emerged into a shaft of moonlight, tall, silver-haired, and solemn, with eyes that reflected stars no human astronomy had named. Harry recognized him from his first year. Fire's. The centaur inclined his head. Harry Potter neither moved. Harry could smell the centaur's blood beneath skin and muscle. Strong, fast, wild. It called to the hunger in a way animal blood from a container never had. Harry stepped back. Fire's noticed, "You fear yourself." "Yes, good." Harry looked up. The centaur's face remained calm. "Fear is not always weakness," Firen said. "Sometimes it is the final wall between power and appetite." Harry swallowed. "What do you know?" The stars are troubled. They always are when centaurs talk. A faint smile touched Firen's mouth. "You have changed." "Not enough." "No," Firen's agreed. "Not enough to be lost." Harry looked away. The moonlight painted his hands silver. "What am I becoming?" Firen's was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "There are old lines in the world, older than wand, older than ministry. Older than the names wizards give themselves to feel safe. You carry one." Harry's throat tightened. "Can I stop it?" "No," the answer was gentle. That made it worse. "Can I choose what I do with it?" Firen's lowered his head, not in submission, in recognition. "Yes." Something moved through the trees behind him. More centaurs, hidden but watching. Harry could feel their attention like stars pressed close to earth. None attacked, none fled. Firen straightened. The forest knows predators. It does not hate them. It hates only those who kill beyond hunger. Harry thought of Voldemort, of Tom Riddle's diary, of a boy who split his soul because death frightened him. "I don't want to be a monster." Firen's looked at him with ancient sadness. "Then remember this. Monsters rarely ask that question." Harry stood in the moonlit forest until the hunger quieted. When he returned to the castle, dawn had begun to pale the sky. Ron was asleep in a chair beside the common room fire, clearly having tried to wait up and failed. Hermione was awake at a table, surrounded by books she pretended not to have been reading in panic. She looked up when Harry entered. For 1 second, relief broke her face open. Then she scowled. "You absolute idiot!" Harry smiled tiredly. "Yeah." Ron snorted awake, nearly falling out of the chair. "You're alive." "Yes." "Brilliant. Hermione's going to kill you." "She can try." Hermione marched over and hugged him so hard his ribs hurt. Ron joined a second later, awkward and fierce. Harry stood between them, stiff at first. Then slowly, carefully, he let himself hold on. Outside, sunrise touched the tower windows. His shadow stretched behind him across the common room floor. It had too many eyes now, but for the first time they were all closed. Chapter 4, The Helsing Protocol. By the end of 3rd year, Harry Potter had learned that monsters were easier to understand than people. Monsters had rules. A werewolf changed beneath the full moon. A basilisk killed through sight. A dementor fed on happiness until the soul itself became quiet. A boggart wore fear like borrowed clothes. People were less honest. People smiled while hiding knives behind tradition. People called silence protection. People called fear wisdom. People called children symbols, weapons, saviors, threats, and rarely asked which name the child preferred. Third year should have been about Sirius Black. In another life, perhaps it would have been. In this one, Sirius still escaped Azkaban. Dementors still came to Hogwarts. Remus Lupin still taught defense against the dark arts with tired eyes, patient hands, and the scent of old wounds beneath clean robes. Peter Pettigrew still hid in plain sight, pretending to be a rat because cowardice, when practiced long enough, could become a whole body. But Harry's story had already bent too far from the track. Sirius mattered. He mattered because he was innocent. He mattered because he had loved James and Lily. He mattered because Harry saw in him the first adult who looked at him and did not see prophecy before person. Sirius Black looked at Harry and saw James's son first, Lily's son second, and something strange only afterward. That made Harry like him. That also made Harry dangerous around him. The first time Sirius hugged him in the shrieking shack, Harry froze. Not from dislike, from calculation. Sirius's heart beat too close to Harry's ear. Fast, thin from years in Azkaban, but fierce. There was blood under his skin and grief under the blood and guilt under the grief. Harry's hands rose slowly. He hugged back. For 1 second, hunger stirred. Harry stepped away too quickly. Sirius noticed. Remus noticed. Hermione definitely noticed. Ron, leg injured and face pale, noticed last but looked the most hurt by it. Harry hated that. Peter Pettigrew escaped because cowards were slippery creatures and the universe had a cruel sense of rhythm. The truth came out, but freedom did not. Sirius remained hunted. Remus left Hogwarts. The Ministry congratulated itself on preventing a crisis it had created. Dumbledore looked sad and said very little. At the end of third year, Sirius sent Harry a letter. "You are not what they say you are." That was the first line. Harry read it 3 times before continuing. "I do not know what you are. I know what Azkaban teaches a man to smell. Fear, hunger, despair. You carry all 3, but you are ruled by none of them. That matters." Harry folded the letter carefully and kept it beneath a loose floorboard at Privet Drive. That summer he dreamed of the Red Castle again. The man in the red coat stood at the window as always. This time Harry managed one question. "Are you my father?" The man smiled. "Not yet." Harry woke with blood in his mouth and sunlight on his face. He did not write that to Hermione. He did not write it to Ron. He did not write it to Sirius. Some truths felt too large to put on paper. And then fourth year began. The Quidditch World Cup should have been joy. For Ron, it almost was. He talked for weeks about Ireland's chasers, Victor Crumb's impossible dives, the glory of international Quidditch, and why anyone who thought Bulgaria had a balanced side was either blind or Bulgarian. Harry listened because Ron's excitement was warm and uncomplicated. Hermione listened because she was a good friend, though she kept a book open the entire time and made occasional comments about the absurdity of national identity being attached to people flying on household cleaning equipment. The campground smelled like smoke, grass, spilled butterbeer, wet canvas, and thousands of beating hearts. Harry did not like crowds anymore. That was new, or perhaps not new. Perhaps Hogwarts had trained him to endure dense human life by giving it structure: tables, classes, dormitories, rules. The World Cup campsite had no structure. It was bodies and noise and movement in all directions. The hunger noticed. Harry kept to the edges where he could. Hermione walked beside him more often than necessary. Ron noticed that too and stopped complaining about it after the second day. The match itself was brilliant. Even Harry, who enjoyed Quidditch mostly because flying made his body feel temporarily understandable, could admit that. The stadium roared like a living creature. Lights exploded across the sky. Players cut through the air like thrown knives. Crumb moved with a kind of violent grace that made Harry lean forward despite himself. For a few hours, everything was normal. Then night fell. Then the Death Eaters came. They wore masks and laughter. Harry hated the laughter more than the masks. The campground became chaos. Tents burned. People screamed. Children cried. Dark-robed figures marched through the smoke, levitating a Muggle family above the ground as if cruelty were entertainment. Ron cursed. Hermione went white. Harry stood very still. The hunger did not rise this time. Something colder did. Recognition. These were not predators. Predators killed to live. These men performed fear because they wanted the world arranged around their appetite. Harry's shadow stretched across the trampled grass. It was night. The sun was gone. For a moment, the leash loosened. "Harry," Hermione said sharply. He blinked. She was holding his wrist, not gripping, anchoring around them. People ran. Ministry officials shouted. The masked figures jeered and fired spells into the air. One of them raised a wand toward a child who had fallen near an overturned cart. Harry moved. Hermione's hand slipped from his wrist. Harry, he did not cast. Wand magic felt too slow. A spell left the Death Eater's wand, red and vicious. Something black snapped from Harry's shadow and swallowed the spell before it reached the child. The Death Eater stopped laughing. Harry stopped too. The thing between them was shaped almost like a dog. Almost. It had too many angles and no eyes, only a long darkness where a head should have been. It crouched low, attached to Harry by a thread of shadow so thin it vanished whenever smoke crossed it. Harry stared at it. The thing looked back without looking, not separate, not fully. A reflex given shape. The Death Eater backed away. Harry felt the shadow dog's desire, not thought. Desire, chase. Harry's stomach turned. "No," he whispered. The shadow dog trembled. The Death Eater ran. Harry clenched both fists. "No." The shadow dog folded back into the ground like ink poured into a crack. Hermione reached him first, Ron a second later. "What?" Ron said, voice shaking. "Was that?" Harry kept staring at the empty patch of grass. "I don't know." Hermione's face had gone unreadable in the way it did when fear and analysis fought for control. "Did you summon it?" "No." "Did you command it?" Harry swallowed. "Barely." The dark mark rose green above the trees. Everyone looked up. Harry looked at the skull and serpent blazing against the night and felt, not fear, but insult. Voldemort's symbol was meant to make people remember death. Harry had begun to suspect death was not Voldemort's domain. It was only the thing he had spent his life fleeing. The goblet of fire burned blue-white in the entrance hall. Harry disliked it immediately, not because it was dark, because it was old. The goblet was not sentient in the way the Sorting Hat was sentient. It did not think in words. It did not judge, advise, or sing. It remembered. That was worse. Objects that remembered too much had weight. The diary had remembered Tom Riddle and nearly turned memory into murder. The mirror of Air-Eyes remembered desire and trapped people in longing. The goblet remembered contracts, bloodlines, names offered freely and names stolen. When students gathered around it, laughing and daring each other to cross Dumbledore's age line, Harry stayed near the wall. He could hear the goblet, not voice, pulse. A hollow, ceremonial thump like a heart made of fire. Hermione noticed him watching it. Something wrong, old magic. Yes, obviously. No, older than the tournament. Hermione looked at the goblet more closely. Ron arrived carrying 3 pastries he had somehow acquired. "It's a cup, Harry." "It's never just a cup," Hermione muttered. Ron considered this, then nodded. "Fair." Harry smiled faintly. That was how it was now. Ron joked because he was frightened. Hermione researched because she was frightened. Harry listened to things no one else heard because he was frightened. And somehow, between those 3 methods, they survived. The tournament began as spectacle. Durmstrang arrived like a warship disguised as a school. Beauxbatons arrived in blue silk and elegance. Hogwarts students tried very hard not to stare and failed. Ron nearly swallowed his own tongue when Victor Crumb entered the Great Hall. Hermione pretended not to notice and noticed everything. Then the goblet chose its champions: Cedric Diggory, Fleur de Lacquer, Victor Crumb. Applause, cheers, pride, envy. Then the goblet flared again. Harry felt it before the parchment appeared. The fire turned briefly silver, only for a second, only Harry noticed. A fourth name spat from the goblet and drifted down into Dumbledore's hand. The old wizard's face changed. Harry Potter! The hall exploded, not with sound, with hunger. Accusation had a heartbeat. So did suspicion. So did betrayal. Hundreds of students turned on him at once. And for one disorienting moment, Harry was back in the great hall beneath the sorting hat, every eye fixed on his scar. But this time the room did not see a miracle. It saw cheating. It saw danger. It saw a boy who had already been whispered about as too strange, too powerful, too dark. Harry stood slowly. Ron's face had gone blank. Hermione's hand closed around his sleeve. "I didn't," Harry said. "I know," she whispered immediately. Ron said nothing. Harry looked at him. Ron's heartbeat was a mess, not disbelief, exactly worse. Hurt, the kind of hurt that wanted to become disbelief, because disbelief was easier than admitting jealousy. Harry walked forward. The goblet's blue flames bent toward him as he passed. Dumbledore did not shout. He did not shake Harry. He only looked at him with the same terrible mixture of kindness and calculation Harry had come to dread. "Did you put your name into the goblet of fire?" No. The answer was simple. It should have been enough. It was not. Because magic, Harry was learning, could force a body into danger and call it binding. Because adults could look at a child and say there was no choice. Because old cups remembered names better than they remembered consent. When Barty Crouch Sr. declared Harry magically bound, Harry almost laughed. Instead, he looked at Dumbledore. "You're allowing this?" Dumbledore's eyes flickered. "I am trying to understand how it happened." "That isn't what I asked." The room went still. Moody's magical eye spun toward him. Snape's lip curled. Karkaroff watched like a vulture pretending to be a diplomat. Maxime frowned. Bagman looked uncomfortable for the first time in his life. Dumbledore said quietly, "For now, the binding stands." Something dark moved under Harry's skin. Fawkes, far away in the headmaster's office, began to sing. Harry heard it. No one else did. He forced his hands to open. "Then I'll survive it," he said. Mad Eye Moody barked a laugh. Harry did not look at him. If he had, he might have noticed how the fake professor's heartbeat skipped in relief. Ron came around before the first task. Not quickly, not easily. For 2 weeks, silence sat between them at the Gryffindor table like a fourth person. Harry did not beg. He had learned young not to beg for affection. Hermione was furious with Ron on Harry's behalf, and furious with Harry for refusing to explain that the refusal hurt. She moved between them like an ambassador between hostile nations, except both nations were 14-year-old boys, and one of them could accidentally frighten animals into obedience. "You should talk to him," she told Harry one evening in the library. "He knows where I sleep." "That is not the same thing." Harry turned a page without reading it. Hermione lowered her voice. "He's jealous and frightened and ashamed of both." Harry said nothing. "You're allowed to be angry." "I am angry." "No, you're cold. That's different." His eyes lifted. Hermione held his gaze. She had grown better at that. Few people had. "He hurt you," she said. "You don't have to pretend he didn't." Harry looked back down. "If I let myself be angry, things happen." Hermione's expression softened, then sharpened with resolve. "Then we make anger safer. We don't bury it until it turns into something with teeth." Harry almost smiled. "That sounds like one of your essays." "It would be an excellent essay." Ron returned after the dragons. Of course it took dragons. The first task smelled of smoke, fear, and ancient reptile fury. Harry faced the Hungarian horntail beneath a cold sky with his firebolt summoned to his hand and every eye in the stadium waiting to see whether he would die. Sunlight helped. The deeper power stayed quiet beneath daylight. That was good. Harry wanted to win this as a wizard, not because wand magic felt natural, because it was chosen. The broom answered him like an old friend. He flew not with brute strength but precision, drawing the horntail away from her clutch, using speed and patience instead of aggression. The dragon snapped, roared, and lashed her tail hard enough to shatter stone. Harry did not hate her. She was afraid for her eggs. That was honest. He took the golden egg and survived. The crowd erupted. Ron found him afterward, pale and shaking. I reckon someone really is trying to kill you." Harry looked at him. Ron swallowed. "That sounded better in my head." Harry waited. Ron's ears went red. "I was a prat." "Yes. I'm sorry." Harry studied him. Ron did not look away. Fear, shame, loyalty, all of it there, all of it human. Harry let out a breath. "Don't do it again." Ron nodded quickly. "Right. Yeah, no, definitely not." Hermione, standing nearby, burst into tears and hugged them both with enough force to make Ron yelp. Harry allowed it. The hunger did not stir. That felt like victory. The second task nearly broke him, not because of the lake. Water did not frighten Harry. The cold was unpleasant and the depths were black, but darkness was not his enemy. The gillyweed worked. The merpeople watched. The hostages floated in enchanted sleep beneath the water. Ron, Hermione, Cho Chang, Gabrielle de Lacquer. Harry's heart slowed when he saw them. The task was designed to test courage and judgment. It did not understand possession, not the evil kind, the protective kind, the kind buried in the thesis of Harry's blood. Predators protect what is theirs. Ron and Hermione hung helpless in the water, pale and still, and something inside Harry began to wake, not fully, but enough. His fingers darkened at the tips. Shadows leaked from his sleeves, though no sunlight reached the lakebed. The merpeople shifted back, spears lowering uncertainly. Harry cut Ron free, then Hermione. He should have left the others. That was the task. But the idea of leaving a child behind made the thing under his ribs snarl, so he stayed. He waited. He took Gabrielle too when Fleur did not come. The Grindylows attacked on the ascent. Harry kicked, struggled, dragged bodies upward. One Grindylow clawed his arm. Blood entered the water. The lake changed. Every creature nearby froze. The blood spread in a thin silver-red cloud. Harry felt the entire lake notice him. Far away, the giant squid turned. Deeper still, older things under the mud opened blind attention. The Grindylows fled. Harry broke the surface, gasping, dragging hostages toward the platforms. The crowd cheered. Harry heard none of it. He was too busy clenching his bleeding arm beneath the water, willing the blood to stop moving on its own. Hermione woke coughing. Ron spluttered. Gabrielle cried. Fleur kissed Harry on both cheeks and called him noble. Harry wanted to laugh. Nobility had nothing to do with it. He had not saved Gabrielle because he was noble. He had saved her because leaving her had felt impossible. That was not the same thing. Dumbledore watched from the judge's platform. So did Moody. So did something else. For one brief moment, across the lake, Harry saw a black dog sitting at the edge of the forbidden forest. Not serious. This dog was too still, too large. Its eyes shone red. Then someone moved in front of him. When Harry looked again, it was gone. The months before the third task narrowed into dread. Hermione's research changed tone. The word Dampier no longer appeared alone. She began cross-referencing older terms. Blood-bound immortals, no-life creatures, cursed blood heirs, vampiric aristocracy, pre-wand predatory lineages. Most books were useless. Some were worse than useless. One book screamed when opened and tried to bite Ron. Another turned its own pages to illustrations Hermione slammed shut so fast Harry did not see them, which was probably for the best. The useful fragments were small and troubling. Sunlight suppression, shadow extension, blood memory, predatory aura, compulsion through eye contact, temporary death resistance after major awakening. That last phrase stayed with Harry, temporary death resistance. It sounded clinical, almost polite. Like saying a house had minor structural instability when the foundation was actually a sleeping dragon. Hermione did not say what she was thinking. Ron did. So if someone kills you wrong, you might not stay dead. Harry stared at him. Ron winced. I know, bad phrasing. No, Harry said slowly. That's exactly the phrasing. Hermione closed the book. We do not test that. I wasn't suggesting we test it. You looked suggestive. How can someone look suggestive about killing their best mate? You manage many impossible things, Ronald. Their argument helped. It made the room feel normal. Harry sat between them in the library, listening to the familiar rhythm of their bickering, and thought of the shadow dog at the World Cup. Since then, shadows had answered him more often, small things. a tendril catching a falling quill before it hit the floor, a dark shape under his bed shifting when he had nightmares, a raven landing near him in the courtyard and leaving behind a beetle crushed flat as if offering tribute. He had not summoned anything again, not properly. He feared what would happen if he tried. Dumbledore did not speak to him about it. That might have been wise. It felt cowardly. Sirius sent letters when he could. Moody is watching you too closely, one said. Harry showed Hermione. She frowned. Ron lowered his voice. He's an Auror. Ex-Auror, Hermione corrected. He drinks from a flask and hexes dustbins. Watching too closely seems like his whole personality. Harry folded the letter. Maybe. Mad Eye Moody had been helpful. That was the problem. He taught Harry practical magic. He warned him about the tournament. He understood danger in a way most teachers only described. His magical eye saw through walls, doors, and likely lies. But Harry's body disliked him, not hated, disliked. Moody smelled of old scars, potion, paranoia, and something underneath that did not match the rest. A disguised smell. Harry had no proof. Hermione trusted proof. Ron trusted obviousness. Harry trusted the hair rising on the back of his neck. None of them knew what to do with that, so they waited, and the third task arrived. The maze grew beneath twilight. That was the first mistake. Had the final task begun at noon, perhaps things would have been different. Sunlight would have pressed down on Harry's inheritance. Wand magic would have remained his first language, borrowed though it was. Shadows would have stayed obedient to the objects that cast them. But the task began as evening lowered itself over Hogwarts. The hedges stood tall and black at the edge of the Quidditch pitch, their leaves whispering though there was no wind. The Triwizard Cup waited somewhere at the center, shining with a false promise. Harry stood beside Cedric Diggory. Cedric smelled of soap, nervous sweat, and decency. That last one had no scent, not really, but Harry had learned that good people often had steadier heartbeats when frightened. Cedric's was fast, yes, but clean. He wanted to win. He did not want Harry dead. That placed him above many people in the stands. You ready? Cedric asked. No, Cedric blinked. Harry looked at the maze. You, Cedric smiled despite himself. Not really. Good, good. I don't trust people who are ready for things like this. Cedric laughed once. Then the whistle blew. They entered. The maze swallowed sound. Harry moved with his wand raised. The first half was almost ordinary danger. Blast ended Scroots. Twisting paths. A boggart that became Vernon Dursley for half a second. Then Voldemort. Then Harry himself with red eyes and a smile too wide. Harry stunned it before the third shape finished forming. His hand shook afterward. The hedges shifted. The sky darkened. Somewhere nearby, Fleur screamed, then silence. Harry's pace quickened. He found Crumb later, eyes blank under the imperious curse. Cedric was down, wand knocked away. Harry cast without hesitation. Stupefy, Crumb fell, Cedric gasped. Thanks. Move. They ran together. Neither suggested splitting up after that. The cup appeared in a clearing at the same time they did. Gold handles, blue light, victory trap. Harry knew before he touched it. His scar burned, his blood went cold. Cedric reached for the cup. Harry grabbed his wrist. Wait, Cedric frowned. What? The hedges behind them moved. Something was coming, not a creature, a decision. Harry looked at Cedric. He could leave him, take the cup, face whatever waited alone. That would be safer for Cedric, maybe. Or maybe the trap would take whoever touched it first, and Cedric would vanish without warning into whatever death had been prepared for Harry. Harry made the choice quickly. Together, he said. Cedric hesitated, then nodded. They both grabbed the cup. The portkey activated, the world twisted. And Harry's shadow panicked. They landed in a graveyard. Night pressed down around them. The air smelled of wet earth, old stone, yew trees, bone dust, and a rat's terror. Cedric stumbled beside him. Where are we? Harry could not answer. His scar had become white fire. The graveyard was wrong, not merely dangerous, prepared. A cauldron steamed between headstones. A small, hunched figure stood nearby, clutching something bundled in cloth. A pale shape lay beneath the cloth, making thin, wet sounds of rage and need. Wormtail, Voldemort. The names arrived before thought. Kill the spare, the bundle spoke. The curse came from Wormtail's wand, green light. Cedric had no time to move. Harry did not cast. Something black erupted from his shadow. Not one dog this time, dozens. They burst outward in silence, shapes half-formed and hungry. Hounds with no eyes, ravens made of torn night, thin hands stretching from the ground, long serpentine shadows with jaws where their bodies should have ended. One struck Cedric from the side and dragged him down behind a headstone. The killing curse passed over him by inches and shattered stone instead. Cedric hit the ground hard, alive and stunned. Wormtail screamed. That was when Harry realized Wormtail was already dying. One of the shadow hounds had crossed the graveyard faster than sight and buried itself in his chest. Not through flesh, through life. Wormtail staggered, eyes wide, wand falling from his fingers. Harry felt the connection, felt the hound feeding, not blood, life force, cowardice, panic, pulse, memory. No, the command tore from Harry. The hound froze. Wormtail collapsed, still breathing but barely. The other shadows strained outward. Death Eaters began appearing around the graveyard, called by the mark, by ritual, by loyalty rotten enough to mistake itself for devotion. The shadows wanted them, all of them. Harry fought his own power harder than he had ever fought any enemy. Not yet, not like this. Not because he was frightened, because part of him was not frightened enough. Cedric groaned behind the headstone. "Stay down," Harry shouted. Ropes snapped around Harry from nowhere, a spell. The shadows recoiled as wand magic bound his body to the grave of Tom Riddle Sr. The moment the ropes touched him, the familiars flickered. Wand magic and blood power ground against each other inside him, each suppressing the other. Harry's holly wand fell from his hand. The shadows thinned, still circling but less solid. Wormtail crawled toward the cauldron, one hand pressed against his chest, sobbing. The bundle hissed. "Continue, my lord, continue," Wormtail obeyed, because some men feared death less than they feared the thing they had chosen to serve. Harry watched the ritual, bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. Wormtail approached with a knife, trembling. Harry looked at him. Peter Pettigrew flinched as though slapped. "Don't," Harry said. Wormtail almost stopped. Almost. Then Voldemort hissed from the bundle, and Wormtail cut Harry's arm. Blood fell into the vial. The graveyard went silent. Even the Death Eaters felt it, though they did not understand. Harry's blood did not drip like normal blood. It fell slowly. Silver threading red, the cauldron accepted it. For 1 second, the fire beneath the cauldron turned black. Then the ritual completed. Steam rose. A body formed, tall, pale, inhuman, wand-thin, red-eyed, noseless. A corpse that had studied elegance and failed. Lord Voldemort stepped from the cauldron. The Death Eaters fell to their knees. Harry remained bound to the gravestone. His blood ran down his arm. His shadow lay at his feet like a living wound. Voldemort turned. At last, face to face. The Dark Lord expected terror. He had arranged the scene for it, the graveyard. The resurrection. The followers. The helpless boy. The dead spare, or what should have been a dead spare. He expected Harry Potter to shake. Harry looked at him with mild, exhausted disappointment. Voldemort's smile faltered only slightly. "You have been taught courage," Voldemort said softly. Harry's voice was hoarse. "No, no. I've been taught hunger." The Death Eaters shifted uneasily. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed. Then he smiled again, wider this time. "Ah, there it is." He stepped closer. Harry's scar screamed. His blood answered. "You have no idea what lives in you, boy." Harry met his eyes. "Do you?" Voldemort's smile sharpened. "Power recognizes power." "No." Harry tilted his head. "Fear recognizes anything bigger than itself." The graveyard went cold. A few Death Eaters inhaled sharply. Voldemort's wand rose, careful. Harry smiled faintly. It was not a nice smile. "How many pieces are you in now?" For the first time since his rebirth, Voldemort stopped moving. The question hung there, simple, impossible. Death Eaters looked between them, confused. Voldemort's face became very still. "What did you say?" Harry's voice was quiet. "The diary was 1. The thing under Quirrell's turban was less than 1. You feel cracked, spread thin. So how many pieces are you in now?" Voldemort stared at him. Then, without meaning to, he answered, "Enough." The word escaped before pride could stop it. Harry's expression changed. Not surprise, understanding. And contempt. You broke yourself. Voldemort's eyes burned. I conquered death. You ran from it. The Death Eaters recoiled as if Harry had struck him. Voldemort's wand hand trembled, not from fear, from rage. I, who have gone further than any wizard. You cut your own soul into pieces because you were scared to die once. Voldemort struck him, not with a curse, with the back of his hand. Harry's head snapped aside. Blood filled his mouth. The graveyard held its breath. Harry slowly turned back. He spat blood onto the grass. It moved. Only a little. A thin red-silver line sliding toward his shadow. Voldemort saw it. This time he understood enough to be afraid. Harry whispered, "I've already died." The ropes around him loosened, not because of wand magic, because the shadows had found the spell's edges and begun eating the intention out of them. It wasn't that bad. Voldemort roared. "Bo!" Harry did not. The Death Eaters closed in. That was their mistake. Harry's shadow opened. The familiars returned, not millions, not an army worthy of legend. Dozens, but dozens were enough. They rose from gravestones, from beneath robes, from the darkness between yew branches. Hounds, ravens, long-limbed shapes, serpents of smoke. Every one of them connected to Harry by threads of life force he could feel draining from him. Weakness struck immediately. His knees nearly buckled. The cost. There was always a cost. The familiars did not kill. Harry would not let them. Instead, they immobilized. A hound leapt through a Death Eater and left him collapsed, gasping, alive but empty-eyed. Ravens wrapped around another's wand arm until the man dropped his wand and screamed without injury. A shadow hand seized Lucius Malfoy by the throat and held him 3 inches above the ground, not choking, simply demonstrating the option. Harry pulled against the ropes. They snapped. He stepped away from the gravestone. Every step hurt. The familiars fed from the reservoir inside him, burning strength he had not known he possessed. His vision blurred at the edges. Cedric crawled out from behind the headstone, pale but alive, clutching Harry's wand. "Harry, stay there." Cedric froze. Voldemort lifted his wand. At once, every familiar turned toward him, not attacking. Waiting, the graveyard was no longer a stage, it was a cage, and Voldemort, reborn in blood and arrogance, realized the cage was not his. Harry crossed the grass toward him. The Death Eaters watched, helpless. "You wanted my blood," Harry said. Voldemort's lips peeled back. "You are still a boy." "Yes." That answer seemed to unsettle Voldemort more than denial would have. Harry stopped a few feet away. "I'm a boy, I'm a wizard, I'm hungry, I'm scared, I'm angry. I'm all of it." His shadow writhed behind him. "And you," Voldemort's eyes burned red. "You are nothing but refusal." Voldemort cast. Harry's wand flew from Cedric's hand into Harry's grip. The moment Harry caught it, the shadows screamed, not aloud, inside him. Wand magic and vampiric power collided, and the familiars flickered. Several dissolved. The Death Eaters they held collapsed, fully unconscious but alive. Harry nearly fell. He had chosen the wand. The leash closed. Voldemort saw his chance. Avada Kedavra, Harry cast at the same time. Expelliarmus, green met red gold. The connection formed, priori incantatem. Light caged them. Voldemort's wand locked to Harry's. The remaining shadows retreated, forced back under the pressure of wand magic. Harry felt weaker without them and clearer at the same time. Ghostly shapes emerged. Not true ghosts. Echoes. Cedric did not appear because Cedric was alive. That mattered. Instead, the shades of Voldemort's victims moved between the light strands, hollow and brave. They whispered guidance. They told Harry when to break the connection. Harry looked through the golden web at Voldemort. For one instant, the Dark Lord looked not powerful, not immortal, not terrible, only furious that the universe kept refusing to obey him. Harry broke the connection. "Cedric." Cedric moved. Harry ran. The shadows gathered under his feet, not strong enough to fight but enough to speed him. Voldemort screamed curses. Spells struck headstones, shattered statues, burned grass. Harry reached Cedric. Cedric grabbed the cup. Harry grabbed Cedric. The portkey activated. The graveyard vanished. They returned to Hogwarts alive. That alone ruined several plans. Cedric hit the ground beside Harry on the Quidditch pitch, gasping and shaking but breathing. The stadium's cheers died as people realized something was wrong. Harry rolled onto his back and stared at the night sky. His body felt hollowed out, not wounded, spent. The familiars had cost him. Every shadow he had forced into shape had eaten from his own stored life force, and now his bones felt full of cold sand. Cedric sat up first. "He's back," Cedric shouted. The words spread like fire. "He's back. Voldemort's back," the crowd recoiled. Fudge descended from the stands with Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape, Moody, Bagman, and a cluster of Ministry officials. Harry tried to stand, failed. Hermione reached him before the adults did. Ron was right behind her. Hermione dropped to her knees, hands hovering over him, afraid to touch where he might hurt. "Harry, I'm fine. You are absolutely not fine." Ron looked at Cedric, then at Harry. "Where's the blood?" Harry blinked. "What?" Ron's face was white. "You're covered in dirt and your sleeves cut, but there's no blood." Harry looked at his arm. The cut Wormtail had made was sealed. Silver crusted the edge like dried moonlight. Fudge saw it. His expression changed. Dumbledore saw Fudge see it. That was when the night became political. Cedric told them everything, not elegantly, not calmly, but clearly. The graveyard. Wormtail, the cauldron, Voldemort, the Death Eaters. The shadows. He stopped there, then looked at Harry. Harry closed his eyes. Fudge followed Cedric's gaze. "Shadows," the minister repeated. Cedric swallowed. "They saved my life." "That is not what I asked." Dumbledore stepped in. "Cornelius," but Fudge had already found the shape of his fear. It fit too well. Voldemort returning was impossible. A boy becoming something the ministry could classify was manageable. Bureaucracy loved monsters with paperwork. "This is deeply concerning," Fudge said. Harry laughed. It came out tired and ugly. Fudge looked offended. "Mr. Potter, you may not understand the seriousness of he's back." "That remains unproven." Cedric stared at him. "I saw him. You were under extreme magical distress." "My son does not lie," Amos Diggory snapped, arriving breathless and terrified. Fudge ignored him. His eyes remained on Harry. "You have been involved in a number of dark incidents, Mr. Potter." Hermione stood slowly. Ron did too. Harry heard both their heartbeats, fast, afraid, staying. Dumbledore's voice cooled. "Careful, Cornelius." Fudge's face tightened. "No, Albus, I've been careful, too careful. First Quirrell dies by contact with this boy, then the chamber opens and a basilisk dies under mysterious circumstances. There have been reports, whispers, signs, and now a graveyard full of incapacitated pure-blood citizens. Death Eaters," Cedric said. Alleged. Harry sat up. The movement hurt. Everyone looked at him. Fudge took one step back before he could stop himself. Harry noticed. So did everyone else. "Classify me," Harry said quietly. "Go on." Fudge's mouth opened, closed. Dumbledore's face was unreadable. Harry looked at the Minister of Magic and saw with sudden clarity how small the man was. Not in body, in spirit. A frightened little man wearing a large office, desperate for any explanation that did not require courage. "You don't want Voldemort back," Harry said, "so make me the monster instead." Fudge went red. "That is enough." "No," Harry said, "it isn't." The shadows beneath the stretcher shifted. Hermione touched his shoulder, not warning, reminder. Harry breathed. The shadows settled. Fudge saw that too. By morning, the Ministry's first internal memo would not say Voldemort had returned. It would say Harry Potter required evaluation under dark creature classification protocols. By morning, Cedric Diggory's testimony would be called trauma confusion. By morning, Dumbledore would begin gathering the Order again. By morning, the war would have returned, whether the Ministry admitted it or not. But that night, Harry was taken to the hospital wing. Cedric was placed in the bed beside him. Ron refused to leave. Hermione refused louder. Madame Pomfrey threatened everyone equally and lost. Near dawn, Cedric turned his head. "Harry." "Yeah, those things in the graveyard." Harry stared at the ceiling. "What about them?" Cedric was quiet for a moment. "They could have killed everyone." "Yes, but they didn't." Harry closed his eyes. "No, because of you?" Harry thought of the hound in Wormtail's chest, of the life force draining from him, of how easy it had felt to let the shadows chase. Barely, he said. Cedric accepted that. It was a kindness. Dumbledore came after sunrise. Harry was awake, of course he was. Sunlight filled the hospital wing, pressing his deeper instincts down until he felt almost human again. Almost weak. Almost grateful. Ron slept in a chair with his mouth open. Hermione sat beside Harry's bed, awake, reading a book upside down and not noticing. Cedric slept badly across the room. Dumbledore stood at the end of Harry's bed. Hermione looked up. Something passed between her and the headmaster. It was not respect. Not anymore. Miss Granger. Dumbledore said softly, "Might I speak with Harry alone?" "No," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. Harry looked back. "She stays." Hermione's face did something complicated. Dumbledore inclined his head. "As you wish." He conjured a chair and sat. For a while no one spoke. Then Dumbledore said, "What happened in the graveyard?" Harry laughed once, without humor. "You already know enough." "I know pieces." Harry turned his head toward the window. Sunlight warmed the sheets. "You like pieces." Dumbledore took that quietly. Hermione's hand tightened around her closed book. Harry looked back at him. "You knew what I was before the chamber." Dumbledore's expression did not change. His heartbeat did. Harry heard it clearly. "Yes," Harry said. "You did." Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly. "I suspected." "You always suspect. It saves you from saying you knew." Hermione inhaled softly. Dumbledore looked older than Harry had ever seen him. "That is not entirely unfair." Harry's anger rose, but sunlight kept it human. That almost made it sharper. "You knew after first year." "Quirrell burned when I touched him. You saw my blood. You knew after the chamber. Fawkes told you something. You knew enough to write a letter you burned." Dumbledore's eyes opened. For the first time, true surprise crossed his face. Hermione looked from one to the other. "What letter?" she asked. Dumbledore said nothing. Harry's voice dropped. "Who is Alucard?" The hospital wing seemed to shrink around the name. Fawkes, somewhere far away, sang one low note. Dumbledore's hands folded together. He did not answer. Harry smiled faintly. It was not a kind smile. "There it is." "Harry," Dumbledore said very softly, "some names are doors. Then stop building walls and calling them protection." The words hit harder than Harry expected. Dumbledore looked away, not in defeat, in shame. That frightened Harry more. "I believed," Dumbledore said slowly, "that if you were allowed to grow as Lily intended, as humanly as possible, the other inheritance might remain dormant." "My life with the Dursleys was human." Hermione's face hardened. Dumbledore flinched, a small movement, but real. "No," he said. "It was not." Harry waited. No excuse came. "That was almost worse than excuses." "I have made grave errors," Dumbledore said. Harry's laugh was quiet. "People keep saying that after children survive them." Ron stirred in his chair but did not wake. Dumbledore looked at Harry then, fully. "There is a war coming. There was always a war coming." "Yes, and you need a weapon." Dumbledore's voice sharpened. "No." Harry's eyes narrowed. The old wizard leaned forward. "No, Harry, whatever else you believe of me, believe this. I do not want you as a weapon. But you'll use me as one if the alternative is worse." Silence. Hermione looked down. Because she understood, because they all did. That was the cruelty of Dumbledore, not that he was evil. Evil would have been easier. The cruelty was that he loved people and still placed them on boards when he believed the game demanded it. Harry turned back to the window. "Get out." Dumbledore stood slowly. At the door he paused. "Voldemort will come for you harder now." He already did. "No," Dumbledore said. "Tonight he tried to restore himself. Next he will try to understand you." Harry looked over. Dumbledore's face was grave. "And if he understands enough, he will try to own what he cannot kill." The door closed behind him. Hermione sat very still. Ron woke up 5 seconds later, blinking. "Did I miss something?" Harry looked at the ceiling. "Yes." Ron groaned. "Important," Hermione said. "Very." Ron rubbed his face. "Brilliant. Wake me next time." Harry laughed. It hurt, but it was real. Far away, in a ruined manor where Death Eaters knelt and dared not raise their eyes, Lord Voldemort stood before a cracked mirror. His new body felt wrong, not weak, wrong. Harry Potter's blood had given him form, but not mastery. The ritual had succeeded. Yet beneath his skin, something resisted. Not Lily's protection, as he had expected. Not exactly. Older. Colder, a warning written into the blood he had stolen. Wormtail lay unconscious in another room, drained almost to death by the thing Potter had unleashed. The Death Eaters whispered when they thought he could not hear. Lucius Malfoy's throat bore no bruise, yet he touched it constantly. Avery had not spoken since the graveyard. Not shook whenever shadows crossed candlelight, Voldemort despised them for their fear. He despised himself more for understanding it. Potter should have been a boy, a brave boy, a lucky boy, a symbol built by fools. Instead, when the shadows rose, Voldemort had felt the graveyard's hierarchy change. He had spent his life becoming the most feared thing in the wizarding world. And in that graveyard, for several seconds, the darkness had not belonged to him. Voldemort looked into the mirror. For a moment, behind his reflection, he thought he saw a man in a red coat smiling. He turned. The room was empty. When he looked back, the mirror had cracked from top to bottom. Voldemort raised his wand and shattered it completely. "Find out," he whispered. The nearest Death Eater trembled. "My lord!" Voldemort's red eyes burned. "Find out what he is." At Hogwarts, Harry slept near sunrise. He dreamed of the Red Castle. This time the sea was calm. The man in the red coat sat in a high-backed chair before an empty fireplace, one leg crossed over the other, gloved hands resting lightly on the arms. Harry stood across from him. "You watched." Harry said, "Yes. You didn't help." "No." Anger rose, hot and clean. "Cedric almost died. But he did not." "That isn't an answer." "It is the only answer that matters tonight." Harry stepped closer. The castle shadows leaned toward him. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "You know?" "No." "I know the shape of you, not the truth." "Good. Shapes are more honest." Harry's hands curled into fists. The man's smile softened by a fraction. "You held them back." "The shadows, the appetite." Harry looked away. "Barely. Barely is enough." "Not forever." "No," the man agreed. "Not forever." The honesty hit harder than comfort would have. Harry looked back. "Am I going to become you?" The man was silent for a long time. Then he leaned forward. His red eyes were ancient, amused, and sad in a way Harry could barely stand. "That," he said, "is the first interesting question you have asked." The dream began to fade. Harry tried to hold it. The castle stretched. The sea darkened. The man's final words followed him into waking. "Do not rush, little Dampier. The night is patient." Harry woke in the hospital wing with sunlight across his chest, Hermione asleep in the chair beside him, Ron snoring on the floor, and Cedric alive in the next bed. His shadow lay beneath him. Still, quiet, for now. Harry reached for his wand on the bedside table. He held it in his hand until his breathing steadied. The wood was warm, borrowed, chosen. A leash. A promise. Outside the hospital wing, the wizarding world began deciding what kind of monster Harry Potter was. Inside, Harry closed his fingers around the wand and decided, for one more day, not to become one. Chapter 5. The father arrives. The ministry did not call Harry Potter a monster in public. That would have required courage. Instead, they used phrases. Irregular magical classification. Possible non-human hereditary influence. Dark creature adjacency. Protective observation pending formal review. Hermione read the first article aloud at breakfast and became angrier with every sentence. By the time she reached the third paragraph, her voice had gone dangerously calm. Ron lowered his fork. "That bad?" Hermione folded the prophet with such precision that Harry expected it to tear itself out of fear. "Apparently Harry is not a liar anymore." Ron blinked. "Well, that's good. He is now an unstable magical entity whose testimony cannot be considered reliable until the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures completes a preliminary identity audit." Ron stared. Harry buttered his toast. "That sounds expensive." Hermione turned on him. "This is not funny. It's a little funny." "No, Harry, it is not. They're trying to avoid admitting Voldemort is back by making you the problem." Ron looked around quickly when she said the name, then forced himself not to flinch. Harry noticed. Ron noticed Harry noticing. "Getting better." Ron muttered. "You are," Harry said. Ron gave him a small, grateful look. Hermione was not distracted. "They're building a legal category around you." Harry looked toward the enchanted ceiling. Morning light spilled across the great hall, thin and gold. It helped. In daylight, his blood stayed quieter. His shadow behaved like a shadow. His wand felt heavier in his pocket, which was comforting in a way he did not like examining. "Let them," Harry said. Hermione's eyes flashed. "Let them! They don't know what I am. Neither do we." "No," Harry said softly. "But we know what I'm not." Ron leaned back. "Do we?" Harry looked at him. Ron's face reddened, but he did not look away. Harry appreciated that more than agreement. "I'm not theirs," Harry said. The words landed harder than he expected. Hermione's anger shifted into something quieter. Ron nodded once. "No," he said. "You're ours." Harry looked down at his plate. The hunger stirred faintly, not from blood, from belonging. That was somehow more frightening. Fifth year began under watch. Hogwarts had always watched Harry. Portraits followed him. Students whispered. Teachers looked at his scar, his hands, his shadow. Even the castle itself seemed to listen when he walked alone after dark. But this was different. This was official. Dolores Umbridge arrived in pink robes and smelled of perfume, parchment, sugar, and cruelty polished until it shone. Her heartbeat was steady. That was the first thing Harry disliked. Cruel people usually had tells. Vernon's anger had thundered through his pulse. Draco's arrogance had always cracked around fear. Even Snape's bitterness carried old pain under it, sharp and sour. Umbridge was calm, not because she was brave, because she had made a home inside her own certainty. People who believed the system would protect them while they hurt others were the hardest kind to frighten. During her first defense against the dark arts class, she smiled at Harry as if he were a stain she had been sent to scrub. "Mr. Potter," she said sweetly, "I do hope you understand that this year we will be discouraging dramatics." Harry did not answer. Her smile widened. "Words, Mr. Potter, you do have them, I trust." Ron's hand clenched around his quill. Hermione sat very still. Harry looked at Umbridge. For a moment, the room thinned around them. He heard every heartbeat in the classroom. Students afraid of getting detention. Students eager to see him humiliated. Students who wanted to believe the ministry because believing adults had failed them was too frightening. Umbridge's pulse remained even. Harry understood then. She was not afraid of him because she did not believe he was real, not Harry the person, only Harry the file, Harry the classification, Harry the inconvenience. "Yes," Harry said. "How lovely." "Then you will use them to repeat after me. There is no need for practical defensive magic in a properly ordered society." Hermione's breath caught. Harry tilted his head. Cedric Diggory would disagree. The classroom went silent. Umbridge's smile froze. Cedric had returned to Hogwarts changed. Alive, yes. That mattered. It mattered so much that Harry sometimes woke in the night and listened across the castle until he found Cedric's heartbeat in the Hufflepuff dormitories. But alive did not mean untouched. Cedric no longer laughed as easily. He watched doorways. He disliked sudden green light. He had told the truth about the graveyard every time he was asked, and every time the ministry thanked him for his confused bravery and printed something else. Now his name sat in the classroom like a blade laid flat on a table. Umbridge recovered first. "Mr. Diggory's unfortunate experience is not the subject of this lesson." "It should be. Detention, Mr. Potter." Harry smiled faintly. The room grew colder. Umbridge's smile twitched. Hermione's hand found Harry's wrist under the desk. Sunlight was coming through the window. Good, enough. Harry breathed once. The cold withdrew. "Fine," he said. Umbridge watched him with small, shining eyes. For the first time, her heartbeat skipped. Only once. Harry heard it. So did something inside him. It smiled. Detention with Umbridge was meant to teach obedience. That was its second mistake. The first was assuming pain meant the same thing to Harry Potter as it did to other children. The quill carved words into his skin. "I must not tell lies." Again, again, again. Blood rose, red at first. Then silver-threaded. Umbridge noticed after the fourth line. Her eyes dropped to the back of his hand. Her smile faded. Harry watched her watch the wound close too quickly, not fully, not harmlessly, but enough. The words remained, pale and angry beneath the skin. The blood did not fall. It crawled back. Umbridge stood. "Hold out your hand, Mr. Potter," Harry did. She looked at the silver sheen and swallowed. There it was, fear, small, sweet, honest. Harry hated that part of him noticed the taste of it. "What are you?" she whispered. Harry looked up. "A student?" Umbridge's mouth tightened. "No, no, I do not think so." She wrote 3 letters that night, one to Fudge, one to the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, one to a sealed ministry archive that had not been opened since the Grindelwald War. Harry knew because the school owls would not carry them. Umbridge had to send ministry couriers. The owls refused to touch the envelopes. Hedwig sat beside Harry the next morning and looked deeply pleased with herself. The Order of the Phoenix gathered in Grimmauld Place like people trying to build a wall out of secrets. Harry hated the house immediately. Number 12 did not feel haunted. Haunted houses had grief. Grimmauld Place had inheritance. It smelled of dust, old blood, rotting velvet, and pure blood pride decaying slowly in its own locked rooms. The walls remembered things. The portraits muttered. The silverware disliked him. The family tapestry burned with names cut away and names preserved, as if blood were a ledger and love an accounting error. Sirius met him at the door. For one brief, impossible second, Sirius looked happy. Then he saw Harry's face, the tension in his shoulders, the way Harry paused before stepping over the threshold like an animal scenting a trap. Sirius's smile died. "They're afraid of you," Sirius said. Harry blinked. "Hello to you too." Sirius barked a laugh and pulled him into a hug. Harry stiffened, then forced himself not to. Sirius noticed anyway. He let go quickly. "I'm sorry," Harry said. "Don't be." "I don't mean to. I said don't be." Sirius's voice had gone rough. Harry looked at him. Sirius Black had lost 12 years to Azkaban, 2 friends to murder, 1 friend to betrayal, and his godson to a doorstep. He had every right to be broken in ugly ways. Instead, he looked at Harry like a man making a choice. "You don't owe anyone comfort with what you are," Sirius said. "Not even me." The words settled under Harry's ribs, warm, painful. Behind Sirius, Remus Lupin watched from the hall. Remus looked tired, as always. His face was thinner than last year. The approaching full moon lived beneath his skin like a second pulse. When Harry met his eyes, Remus inclined his head slightly, predator to predator, not equal, not the same, but understood. Molly Weasley hugged Harry next and pretended not to cry. Arthur shook his hand with awkward kindness, and too many questions he politely did not ask. Tonks tripped over an umbrella stand, changed her hair from purple to embarrassed pink, and called the ministry a nest of spineless flobberworms. Kingsley Shacklebolt looked at Harry once, deeply, and then treated him exactly like everyone else, which made Harry like him immediately. Snape was there too. Snape looked at Harry's scar, then at his hands. Then, very briefly, at his shadow. His lip curled. "Potter, Professor." Snape's heartbeat remained controlled, but Harry smelled something old in him, not fear recognition by association. Snape had known Lily. That knowledge sat between them like an unsheathed knife. Dumbledore arrived last. Of course he did. The meeting began with maps, reports, whispers, and omissions. Harry was allowed to sit in the room but not allowed to know enough. That was the shape of it. Adults used phrases like, "for your safety," and "not yet," and "when the time comes," until Harry began to feel the walls of Grimmauld Place breathing with him. The hunger disliked being caged. So did Harry. Finally, Moody said, "The boy needs training." Molly stiffened. "He is 15. He was 14 in a graveyard full of Death Eaters. He should not have been, but he was. The room went quiet. Harry looked at Moody, the real Moody this time. He smelled different from the imposter, older, rougher, scarred all the way down. His heartbeat was irregular but fearless in the practical way of a man who had expected death for decades and considered it rude for being late. Moody's magical eye fixed on Harry. "Whatever he is, you know who will want it. Best he knows how not to hand it over." Dumbledore's voice was soft. "There are risks." Harry laughed before he could stop himself. Everyone turned. He stood. "The risk was putting me with the Dursleys. The risk was not telling me what was under Quirrell's turban. The risk was letting me walk into the chamber without knowing what my blood might do." The risk was pretending a tournament contract mattered more than my life. Dumbledore closed his eyes. Molly whispered, "Harry!" Harry looked at her and softened a little, not enough to stop. "I'm done being protected by ignorance." Silence. Then Sirius leaned back in his chair and smiled like a man watching a door finally kick itself open. "He gets that from Lily," he said. Snape's face went white with fury. "No," Harry said. The room shifted. He did not know why he said it until the words were already there. "I don't think I only get it from Lily." Dumbledore opened his eyes. Harry looked straight at him. "Do I?" No one moved. Then, somewhere in the house, the portrait of Walburga Black began to scream, not words, just screaming. Every candle in the room bent toward the door. A letter slid under it. Plain parchment. No seal, no owl, no sound of footsteps. Sirius drew his wand. Remus did too. Moody's eyes spun. Harry already knew. He walked to the door and picked up the letter. On the outside, in elegant black handwriting, were 3 words. "Whenever you're ready." Inside were 6 more. "Café." 3 broomsticks. "Tuesday." No signature. Harry's pulse slowed. Dumbledore stood very carefully. "Harry." Harry looked at him. The old wizard suddenly seemed less like a general and more like a man watching an old mistake come home. "Do not go alone." Harry folded the letter. "I wasn't invited alone." He went alone, not because he was foolish, because some meetings were not meant to have witnesses. That was what he told Ron and Hermione. They disagreed loudly. Hermione threatened to follow him under the invisibility cloak. Ron threatened to let her. Sirius threatened to come as Padfoot. Remus quietly pointed out that if the sender was who Dumbledore thought, none of those plans would work unless the sender allowed them to work. That silenced everyone for nearly 4 seconds. Harry compromised by letting them walk him to the edge of Hogsmeade. Snow dusted the village roofs. Smoke curled from chimneys. Students moved in clusters, laughing too loudly because laughter was armor now. Ministry notices had appeared near shop doors warning citizens to report unusual magical predatory activity. Fred and George had charmed one to sing love ballads at passing auras. Harry stood outside the 3 broomsticks. Ron looked miserable. Hermione looked furious. Sirius, disguised poorly beneath a heavy cloak and glamours, looked ready to bite someone. "I'll be inside," Harry said. "If anything happens," Hermione began, "you'll know." "How?" Harry glanced toward the pub windows. For half a second, every shadow inside the 3 broomsticks leaned toward him. Hermione swallowed. Ron muttered, "That'll do it." Harry entered. Warmth hit him first. Butterbeer, firelight, wet wool, roasted meat, old wood, human life. The pub was full enough to be normal, empty enough to be wrong. Madame Rosmerta stood behind the bar, polishing a glass she had already polished. Her smile was fixed. Her heartbeat was calm only because something had convinced her panic would be impolite. At a table near the back, by the window, sat a man in a red coat, not hidden, not disguised, simply present. And because he was present correctly, no one looked at him for too long. Harry walked toward him. The man did not rise. He looked exactly as he had in the dreams and nothing like them. Dreams softened details. Reality sharpened them. His hair was black, falling around a face too pale and too composed. His red coat should have looked ridiculous in a village pub. It did not. It looked like the room had been built around the expectation of his arrival. His eyes were hidden behind orange-tinted glasses. That annoyed Harry. "Take them off," Harry said. The man smiled. Lily said that once. Harry stopped. The name struck harder than any spell. The man removed the glasses. Red eyes met green. The pub noise faded, not vanished, faded. As if the world had politely stepped back. "Hello, Harry." Harry sat down across from him. For a while, neither spoke. 2 predators, one ancient and one becoming, sat across a small wooden table while snow fell outside and a waitress pretended not to tremble. Finally, Harry said, "Are you Alucard?" "Yes." "Are you Vlad?" "When I choose." "Are you my father?" Alucard's smile did not change, but something behind his eyes did. "Yes." Harry expected the word to break something. It did not. It landed with terrible calm. As if his blood had known all along, and only his mind had needed the courtesy of confirmation. Harry looked down at his hands. "Did my mother know?" "Yes." The answer cut through him. Alucard leaned back. "Not everything. Not at first. Lily Evans was clever enough to suspect more than I said and stubborn enough to demand what I withheld. Harry's throat tightened. And you told her, some. That sounds convenient. It is the truth. Harry looked up sharply. Truth in pieces is still manipulation. Alucard's smile widened by a fraction. There you are. What? Her son. Anger flared, the window behind Harry darkened at the edges. Alucard watched with interest, not alarm. Harry forced the shadows down. You don't get to do that. Do what? Sound proud? The first real silence fell between them. Alucard looked toward the fire. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. No, perhaps I do not. That answer did more damage than denial would have. Harry had prepared for cruelty, for arrogance, for some grand speech about destiny and blood. He had not prepared for honesty. Why? Harry asked. Alucard looked back, because she looked at me without fear. Harry waited. Alucard continued, each word precise. I had woken briefly. A whim. London, theatre, rain, noise. Humanity had changed its costumes and kept its appetites. Then there was Lily Evans, who looked at a monster and asked whether monsters obeyed. Harry could almost see it, his mother beneath rainlight, chin lifted, wand near her hand, refusing to be impressed by terror, his chest hurt. The blood pact was deliberate, Alucard said. On my part. Harry's fingers tightened. You used her. No, the word was not defensive, it was absolute. I chose to be mortal enough once to leave something behind. She chose to meet that choice with her own. There was no command, no glamour, no hunt. Harry searched his face. Alucard let him. That was perhaps the most unsettling thing. He did not try to convince. He simply placed the truth between them and allowed Harry to hate it if he wished. Did James know? Alucard smiled faintly. James Potter knew he loved your mother. He knew she carried secrets. He knew the child she bore would be his in every way that mattered to him. Harry closed his eyes. That answer should have comforted him. It did. It also hurt. Was James my father? Yes, Alucard said. Harry opened his eyes. Alucard's expression was steady. Blood is an old truth. It is not the only one. James Potter gave you name, home, protection, and love for as long as his brief life allowed. Do not let my existence steal that from him. Harry looked away. Outside the window, Ron was pretending not to stare from across the street. Hermione was pretending better. Sirius was not pretending at all. Alucard followed Harry's gaze. The black dog loves you. He's my godfather, I know. You watched him in Azkaban. Alucard's face went still. I watched many things. Harry's anger returned. You watched everything? No, but enough. Yes, Privet Drive. Yes. The word struck the table like a dropped blade. Harry leaned forward. You watched. Alucard did not look away. Yes, and did nothing. Yes. The shadows under the table rose like smoke. Madame Rosmerta backed away from the bar. Outside, Sirius straightened. Alucard remained still. Harry's voice lowered. Why? Because Lily raised you human. Harry laughed once, sharp and ugly. The Dursleys raised me in a cupboard. No, Alucard said. They contained you in one. Harry's hand struck the table. The wood cracked. That is not better. No, the shadows climbed the walls. Alucard's red eyes brightened, not in threat, in recognition. Harry's teeth clenched. Give me a reason. Alucard leaned forward then. The pub fire dimmed. The ancient thing beneath his face looked out fully. Had I come when you were 5, they would have died. Harry froze, not from fear. From certainty, Alucard continued. Not because I lacked restraint, because you did. A child with your blood, starved of love and fed on fear, would have reached for the first hand that promised vengeance. I would have given it, gladly. Harry's breathing turned shallow. And when the Dursleys were ash in your memory, when every petty cruelty had been answered with a power no child should wield, what would you have learned? The shadows stopped moving. Alucard's voice softened. You would have learned that hunger is justice if the victim deserves it. Harry could not speak. That is the first lesson of monsters, Alucard said. I refuse to be the one to teach it to you. The room returned slowly. The fire brightened. The shadows slid back under the table. Harry stared at him. He hated the answer. He believed it. That made him hate it more. You could have helped without killing them. Alucard's smile was very old. Could I? Harry looked down. The silence stretched. Then Alucard said, "I am not kind, Harry. Do not mistake honesty for gentleness. I have watched kingdoms burn because they amused me. I have worn names as men wear coats. I have obeyed monsters and devoured saints. I am not here to be forgiven." "Then why are you here?" "Because you are reaching the edge of choices I understand." Harry's throat tightened. The shadows. "Yes, the hunger. Yes, the thing in the graveyard." Alucard's smile showed a flash of teeth. "Your first true summons. Ugly, inefficient, compassionate." Harry blinked. "Compassionate? You saved the Diggory boy." "I almost drained Wormtail to death. Almost is a moral achievement in our bloodline. That is a horrible thing to say. It is a true thing to say." Harry leaned back, exhausted. "I don't want this." "No. Can I get rid of it?" "No. Can you?" "No. Would you if you could?" Alucard was silent. Harry looked at him. For the first time, Alucard seemed to choose his words with care, not because truth was difficult, but because kindness was. "No," he said. Harry closed his eyes. Alucard continued, "But I would teach you to own it without being owned by it." Harry opened his eyes. "Is that what you did?" "No." The answer was immediate. Harry stared. Alucard smiled faintly. "I surrendered completely. That is why you must not become me." There it was, the truth under all the red coats and old castles and dreams, not warning from above, warning from the bottom of the pit. Harry looked at the wand in his pocket. Alucard noticed. "You chose a leash." Harry touched the holly wand. "Yes, good. That doesn't sound like you." "It sounds exactly like me. Only creatures without appetites mock restraint. The starving understand its cost." Harry breathed slowly. The pub felt warmer now, or perhaps Harry did. "Dumbledore knows," Harry said. "Yes, how long?" "Long enough to be ashamed, not long enough to stop himself." Harry almost smiled despite himself. "You don't like him." "I find him tragic. That's worse." "Yes." Harry looked through the window again. Ron was arguing with Hermione. Hermione was clearly trying to stop Sirius from storming into the pub. Sirius was clearly losing that argument only because Remus had appeared and put a hand on his shoulder. Alucard watched them too. "They are why you are not lost," he said. "I know." "Do you?" Harry looked back. Alucard's voice grew quieter. "Predators protect what is theirs. That instinct will save them. It may also destroy everything else if you do not decide where protection ends and appetite begins." Harry thought of the second task, Gabrielle beneath the lake, Cedric in the graveyard, Umbridge's heartbeat skipping. The Dursleys behind bars that suddenly seemed so easy to break. "How?" Alucard stood. The room seemed smaller when he did. "You learn the difference between wanting to feed and choosing not to." "That's it!" "That is everything." Harry stood too. He was not as tall, not as old, not as terrible. But for 1 second their shadows touched across the wooden floor and the pub lights flickered. Alucard placed the orange glasses back on. "Will I see you again?" "When you are ready," Harry frowned. "That's very annoying." "Your mother said that too." The words hurt less this time. Alucard walked toward the door. Harry followed him outside. Snow fell gently over Hogsmeade. Ron, Hermione, Sirius, and Remus went silent. Alucard looked at them one by one. Ron lifted his chin despite being visibly terrified. Hermione stared as if trying to memorize him for later research. Remus bowed his head slightly. Sirius stepped between Alucard and Harry, brave, foolish, loving. Alucard smiled. "You are the black dog. And you're the reason Harry's life is even more insane than it already was." "Sirius," Remus said quietly. "No, I want to hear this." Sirius glared up at Alucard. "You don't get to walk in wearing a dramatic coat and act like blood makes you Father of the Year." Alucard looked genuinely amused. Harry expected anger. It did not come. Instead, Alucard said, "Good." Sirius blinked. "What?" "Stand there, bare your teeth." "Be inconvenient. He needs more of that." Sirius stared at him, completely wrong-footed. Ron whispered, "I think he just complimented you." Sirius snapped, "I know that." Hermione stepped forward. "What are your intentions regarding Harry?" Ron looked at her in disbelief. "Hermione, he's not asking Harry to the Yule Ball." She ignored him. Alucard looked down at her. The air tightened. Harry's hand moved toward his wand. Hermione did not step back. Alucard's smile became almost approving. "To wait," he said. "For what?" "For him to decide what my existence means." Hermione's eyes narrowed. "And if he decides it means nothing, then I will wait elsewhere." Harry's throat tightened. Alucard turned away at the edge of the village. Just before the Hogwarts wards thickened in the air, he stopped. The wards knew him. Harry felt it. The invisible magic around the school did not attack. It did not welcome. It held itself like an old guard recognizing an older war. Alucard placed one gloved hand near the boundary and smiled. "Polite," he murmured. Then he looked back toward the castle. For a moment, all humor left his face. "He's better than you deserved, Lily." Harry heard it, so did no one else. Then Alucard stepped into the dark between falling snowflakes and was gone. Voldemort learned the name 3 nights later. Nagini brought it to him. Not in words, exactly. Snakes did not think like humans, and Nagini was no longer only a snake. She carried impressions in scent, heat, fear, and memory. Snow, a village, Potter's blood waking, old red eyes, a pressure in the dark that had looked at her through layers of distance and smiled. Voldemort tore the memory from her mind and saw him. Red coat, black hair, orange glasses. A face from history's wizards did not teach because some fears survived better when unnamed. For several seconds, Voldemort did not move. Bellatrix Lestrange knelt near his chair, watching him with worshipful hunger. "My lord," Voldemort's fingers tightened around his wand. "Leave." Bellatrix froze. "My lord, if I have leave." She fled. The room emptied. Voldemort stood alone. Alucard, he knew fragments of the name, as all serious students of forbidden immortality did. Not enough. Never enough. A battlefield myth, a vampire king, a weapon wearing a man's body. A creature said to have consumed armies and laughed at holy men. Most accounts contradicted each other. Some claimed he was dead. Others claimed he could not die because death had long ago become bored of asking. Voldemort had dismissed the legends as exaggeration. Now he remembered the graveyard. Harry's shadows, Harry's contempt, Harry's blood in the cauldron turning the fire black. A laugh broke from him. It was not amused, not sane. He had built himself into terror piece by piece. He had split his soul, conquered old rituals, bent followers and enemies alike beneath the weight of his name. And Harry Potter, the child he had failed to kill, was not merely protected by love. He was descended from something that had made death a servant. The insult was cosmic. The fear was worse, not fear of Alucard's power. Power could be studied, bound, stolen, broken. No, what shook Voldemort was the possibility that Alucard found him funny. That somewhere in the dark, an older monster looked at Lord Voldemort and saw not a rival, not a threat, but a clever child who had mutilated himself to avoid a lesson everyone else learned by dying. The mirror across the chamber cracked. Voldemort raised his wand and repaired it. It cracked again. This time in the reflection, something red smiled behind him. Voldemort did not turn. "Laugh while you can," he whispered. The reflection's smile widened. Voldemort shattered the mirror into dust. Then he summoned Lucius Malfoy. Lucius arrived pale, immaculate, and terrified. "My lord." "There are old bindings," Voldemort said. "Pre-ministry, pre-Hogwarts, rituals for creatures that gather souls." Lucius swallowed. "My lord, such texts are mostly theoretical. Find them." "Yes, my lord." And Lucius? "Yes." Voldemort's red eyes burned. "If your son has remembered anything useful about Potter's eyes, you will bring it to me." Lucius went paler. For the first time in his life, Voldemort regretted not killing Draco Malfoy himself in the graveyard. Fear made people remember. The year worsened. That was what years did lately. Umbridge gained power one decree at a time. Dumbledore watched too much and moved too little. Fudge tightened his denial until it became policy. The prophet printed articles suggesting Harry's condition, made him vulnerable to delusions of persecution. Cedric Diggory punched a 7th-year Ravenclaw for repeating that. No one expected it, least of all Cedric. Harry visited him afterward outside the hospital wing. Cedric sat on a bench, knuckles bruised, looking ashamed and pleased with himself. "Bad form," Cedric said. "Terrible," Harry agreed. "I'm head boy material. I'm not supposed to hit people." "Did it help?" Cedric considered. "A bit." Harry sat beside him. For a while they watched students pass. Then Cedric said, "They want me to say I'm confused. I know, I'm not. I know." Cedric looked at him. "I saw the graveyard. I saw him. I saw what you did." Harry's shoulders tightened. Cedric continued, "You saved me. The shadows saved you. You held them back." Harry said nothing. Cedric smiled faintly. "That matters, Potter. Everyone kept saying that." Harry hoped they were right, because Umbridge was getting bolder. Her detentions became tests. She changed quills, changed ink, asked questions about pain tolerance, healing rate, emotional triggers. She made him write statements about obedience and truth and ministry loyalty while watching his blood with bright, hungry eyes. Hermione wanted to report her. To who? Ron asked. The Board of Governors. Lucius Malfoy's friends, the Prophet. They're calling Harry a fang away from eating first years. Professor McGonagall. That one worked, sort of. McGonagall confronted Umbridge. Umbridge smiled. By dinner, McGonagall had received a ministry warning regarding interference in a classified student safety assessment. That night, Harry stood in the defense classroom after detention, staring at the words carved into his hand. The window reflected him. For half a second, his reflection wore red glasses. Harry closed his eyes. When he opened them, Hermione and Ron were in the doorway. Neither spoke. Hermione walked forward and took his hand. Ron stood guard at the door with his wand out, as if daring the entire ministry to come through. Harry laughed softly. Hermione looked up. "What?" Harry shook his head. "Nothing." But it was not nothing. It was the realization that Alucard had been right. Not about everything, perhaps not even about most things, but about this. Harry was not lost because people kept standing too close to him when any sensible person would move away, so they formed the defense group. Not Dumbledore's army, not this time. Harry refused the name. Dumbledore had enough armies in his head. They called it the Lantern Circle because Luna Lovegood, who began attending after appearing in the room of requirement without being invited, said, "Everyone keeps treating darkness like it's evil, but darkness is just where you need to bring better lamps." No one had a better suggestion. So the Lantern Circle learned defensive magic under Harry's instruction. It helped. Teaching helped. That surprised him. Wand magic still felt borrowed, but when Harry taught it, the borrowed nature became useful. He understood spells as tools because they did not feel like his body. He could explain angles, intention, stance, breath. He could tell Neville exactly how to anchor his fear before casting. He could tell Ginny not to push power through anger because anger leaked. He could tell Luna that her spellwork curved because she thought in spirals, and somehow that helped her. They improved. So did Harry, not in power, in restraint. Every lesson was a choice. Wand over shadow, instruction over instinct, patience over hunger. A leash, worn deliberately, can become discipline. That was the part Voldemort would never understand. Dumbledore finally spoke of the greater good in March, not in those words at first. He was too wise for that, too careful. He summoned Harry to his office after Umbridge nearly caught the Lantern Circle. Fawkes sat silent on his perch. The portraits pretended to sleep. The silver instruments hummed and clicked, measuring things Harry did not want measured. Dumbledore offered tea. Harry refused. Dumbledore looked unsurprised. "She will move against you soon," he said. "Umbridge?" "Yes, and through her, Fudge." Harry stood near the window where late sunlight fell across his shoulders. "Let them try." "That would be unwise. I'm tired of wise." Dumbledore sighed. "For many years I believed Voldemort's greatest weakness was his inability to understand love. It is. Perhaps." Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. "But now I fear his greatest danger may be his ability to understand hunger." Harry went still. Dumbledore continued. "He will not appeal to your kindness. He will not try to make you cruel in obvious ways. He will offer justification. He will offer necessity. He will offer enemies who deserve what your blood wishes to do." Harry thought of Umbridge, the Dursleys, Wormtail, Lucius Malfoy held helpless in the air. Dumbledore's voice softened. "And one day, Harry, the enemy may deserve it." Harry looked at him. "That is why you need guidance. From you." "I had hoped." Harry laughed once. It hurt less than before. "No," Dumbledore accepted that quietly. From Alucard, then? No, that surprised him. Harry turned from the window. Alucard knows what I am. He doesn't know what I should be. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then very slowly he smiled, not the twinkling smile, not the headmaster's smile, a tired, genuine smile. No, he said, I suppose he would not. Harry studied him. You were going to use me. Pain crossed Dumbledore's face. Yes. The honesty stunned the room. Even the portrait seemed to wake. Dumbledore folded his hands. I told myself I was preparing you, protecting you, waiting until you were old enough, strong enough, ready enough, but readiness became a horizon, always visible, never reached. Harry said nothing. I feared what you might become if told too early. I feared what the Ministry would do. I feared Voldemort learning the truth. I feared Alucard's influence. I feared many things and called that fear wisdom. Harry's anger was there, but quieter. What do you fear now? Dumbledore looked at him. That you will forgive me too easily because war leaves no room for proper anger. Harry did not expect that. He looked away. I don't forgive you. Good. The word was soft, sincere. Harry looked back. Dumbledore's eyes were bright. But I will fight beside you, Harry said. I know. Not because of prophecy? No. Not because you planned it. No. Harry touched the wand in his pocket. Because people live here. Dumbledore bowed his head. That is a better reason than any I could give you. For the first time in a long while, Harry did not hate him, not forgiveness, not trust. But something less poisoned than before. It would have to do. The attack came through dreams. Of course it did. Voldemort had always liked entering what was not his. Harry saw the corridor first. Black door, Department of Mysteries, Sirius screaming, pain, chains, laughter, red light, Bellatrix. It was crude, powerful, and aimed perfectly at the part of Harry that did not think before protecting. He woke with his shadow spread across the ceiling. Every eye open. Ron shouted and fell out of bed. Neville screamed. Seamus swore. Harry was already standing, Sirius. The name filled him. Possession. Protection. Panic. He reached for his wand, then stopped. The shadow above him wanted to move, not through corridors, through distance, through blood, through fear. For one insane second, Harry knew he could send something to London, not enough to save, enough to hunt. Hermione burst into the boys' dormitory in her dressing gown, hair wild, face pale. Harry, no, he stared at her. She has Sirius. No, you don't know that. Neither do you. Ron stood, breathing hard. Harry, mate, Harry's voice came out wrong. If he dies because we waited. If you go because Voldemort pulled your leash, then he owns the direction of your teeth. Hermione snapped. The room went silent. Harry flinched as if struck. Hermione's eyes filled with tears, but she did not soften. Check first. So they did flu, fire, Grimmauld Place? Sirius's face appeared, confused, irritated, alive. Harry, it's 3 a.m. Harry nearly collapsed. Behind Sirius, Remus appeared with a wand in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. Hermione made a sound halfway between a sob and a furious exhale. Ron sat down heavily on Dean's bed. Harry looked at Sirius through the flames. You're alive. Sirius's expression changed. The irritation vanished. Yeah, he said softly. I'm alive. Harry nodded once, then he turned away before anyone saw his face break. Voldemort had failed, not because Harry was immune. Because his friends had made him verify reality before obeying fear. That was the night Voldemort truly understood the problem. Harry Potter was not alone inside his own head. Alucard came once more before the end of the year, not to Hogwarts, never past the wards. Harry found him at the edge of the Forbidden Forest near dusk, standing where trees met snowmelt and old roots curled like sleeping serpents. You knew Voldemort would try the dream, Harry said. Yes. You didn't warn me. I am not your conscience. Harry glared. Alucard smiled. You are angry. Good. What did you do with it? I checked. Better. Harry stood beside him, looking toward the castle. For several minutes neither spoke. Then Harry asked, Did you love her? Alucard's smile vanished. That was answer enough, but Harry waited. Alucard looked at Hogwarts. I do not love as humans do. That sounds like avoiding the question. It is. Harry almost laughed. Alucard's voice became quieter. Lily Evans made mortality seem less like defeat. Harry swallowed. That was the closest thing to tenderness he had ever heard from him. What did I make it seem like? Alucard looked at him, a question. Harry did not know what to do with that, so he asked another. Will Voldemort come for you? No, you sound sure. He fears being ridiculous more than death. Attacking me directly would risk both. Harry frowned. He fears death most. No, Alucard said. He fears meaninglessness. Death is only the shape it wears. The words stayed with Harry. Alucard turned to leave. Harry spoke before he could vanish. Stay. The word surprised them both. Alucard looked back. Harry's face burned. I don't mean at Hogwarts. I just mean don't disappear for years again. For once, Alucard did not smile. I will be near. Watching? Yes. Harry looked away. That's still creepy. Your mother also said that. This time Harry did laugh, small, unwilling, real. Alucard's expression changed, not warmth, not quite, but something near satisfaction. Then he stepped backward into the trees and was gone before the shadows settled. At the end of 5th year, Umbridge fell, not by Harry's hand. That mattered. The lantern circle was discovered, yes. Umbridge tried to force names, force confessions, force Harry's classification into something permanent and useful. She brought ministry forms, enchanted restraints, and 3 officials who looked far less confident after entering a room where every student had been trained to defend themselves. But it was not Harry's shadows that stopped her. It was McGonagall standing in the doorway with the expression of a woman who had reached the end of patience as a civilized concept. It was Cedric Diggory publicly presenting sworn testimony again. This time supported by Veritaserum he had taken voluntarily in front of the board. It was Amelia Bones, summoned by Hermione through a terrifying chain of legal citations no one had known a 15-year-old could assemble. It was Ron standing in front of Harry when Umbridge tried to call him creature. It was Neville Longbottom casting the cleanest shield charm of his life. It was Luna calmly releasing charmed paper birds carrying copies of Umbridge's detention records into every common room. It was 100 small human choices. That was how tyrants should fall, Harry thought, not consumed by darkness, outnumbered by witnesses. Umbridge was removed. Fudge weakened. The Ministry did not admit Voldemort had returned, not yet, but denial had cracked, and Harry Potter's file received its first official classification. Category 6. Unresolved predatory magical entity human legal personhood maintained pending review. Ron laughed for 7 straight minutes. Hermione did not find it funny until Harry pointed out that human legal personhood maintained meant the Ministry had needed a meeting to decide whether he counted as a person and had, reluctantly, voted yes. Then even Hermione laughed, a little. On the last night before summer, Harry stood at the astronomy tower. Hogwarts spread below him, windows lit, lake dark, forest breathing. The world balanced between war and dawn. Sirius was alive, Cedric was alive. Ron and Hermione were downstairs, arguing about whether Hermione's summer reading list counted as emotional support or psychological warfare. Dumbledore was somewhere in the castle, old and guilty and still trying. Alucard was somewhere beyond the wards, waiting without asking to be welcomed. Voldemort was gathering old bindings and older fears. Harry touched the wand in his pocket. His shadow stretched long behind him. It had too many eyes now, but they did not open without his permission. Not tonight. A voice spoke from the stairwell. Harry, he turned. Dumbledore stood there, silver beard catching moonlight. For a moment, neither said anything. Then Dumbledore said, "The greater good has been used to excuse many sins." Harry watched him carefully. "Yes. I once believed the phrase meant sacrifice in service of others. What does it mean now?" Dumbledore looked over the grounds. "A warning," he said, "that when a man begins speaking of the greater good, someone smaller is usually about to be placed on the altar." Harry let that settle. Then he nodded once. It was not forgiveness, but it was truth. Dumbledore left. Harry turned back to the horizon. At the edge of the forbidden forest, just beyond the wards, a figure in a red coat stood beneath the trees. Too far away for human eyes, Harry saw him anyway. Alucard raised one gloved hand, not farewell, not command, acknowledgement. Harry raised his hand in return. Then he looked east. The first line of sunrise touched the world. His shadow retreated at his feet, patient and full of eyes. Harry stood in the light and chose, again, to remain. Chapter 6. The boy who chose not to feed the war became official only after the Ministry could no longer pretend the bodies were metaphors. That was how Hermione put it. Ron thought it was too grim. Harry thought it was accurate. After Voldemort attacked the Department of Mysteries in June, after Cedric Diggory repeated his graveyard testimony for the 4th time, after Amelia Bones forced half the Wisengamot to admit that mass hallucination was not a functional legal defense, Cornelius Fudge finally collapsed under the weight of his own denial. The headline came 3 days later. He who must not be named returns underneath it, in much smaller print. Harry Potter's classification review remains ongoing. Ron threw the prophet into the fireplace. Priorities, he said bitterly. Harry watched the paper burn. The flames turned green for a moment as enchanted ink curled into ash. Hermione sat at the kitchen table in Grimmauld Place, surrounded by books, ministry notices, and 3 separate drafts of a letter to Amelia Bones. She had been writing all morning with the controlled fury of someone who had discovered bureaucracy could be fought with better bureaucracy. They admitted Voldemort is back, she said. That matters. They also still think Harry might be a public safety category, Ron snapped. I said it matters, not that it's enough. Harry stood by the window. Summer sunlight pressed weakly through the dirty glass. It made him feel almost human. Almost. Sirius had insisted Harry stay at Grimmauld Place that summer, and for once, Dumbledore had not argued. Perhaps guilt had made him generous. Perhaps war had made old plans irrelevant. Perhaps Sirius had threatened to personally haunt every member of the Order if Harry was sent back to Privet Drive. Harry suspected all 3. Grimmauld Place was not home, not really, but Ron was there most days. Hermione practically lived in the library. Sirius filled the house with noise and bad cooking and arguments with portraits. Remus came and went like a tired ghost who had learned to smile in doorways. Tonks broke things. Kingsley brought news. Molly Weasley fussed over everyone until even the furniture seemed better fed. It was crowded. Messy, loud, alive. The hunger disliked it. Harry loved it anyway. That was the shape of him now. Contradiction wearing glasses, a boy with an old monster's blood, a wizard whose wand felt like a chosen leash, a predator learning that protection was not the same as possession. And somewhere beyond the wards, Alucard waited, not close, never too close. But Harry knew when he was near. Shadows behaved differently, mirrors became less reliable, owls refused to fly in certain directions after dusk. Sirius hated this. He's lurking, Sirius said one evening, glaring through the kitchen window at absolutely nothing. That's what he does. He lurks. Remus sipped tea. To be fair, Sirius, you spent a year living as a large black dog in the Forbidden Forest. That was tactical. So is lurking, apparently. Harry smiled into his cup. Sirius pointed at him. Don't encourage him. I didn't say anything. You looked amused. I'm allowed. Sirius huffed, but there was no real anger in it. That was another thing Harry had learned. Love often disguised itself as complaint. Then Dumbledore arrived with a cursed ring and a blackened hand. The war changed shape again. Dumbledore placed the ring on the kitchen table like an apology. No one touched it. Even Ron, who had once picked up a broken wand, a cursed chess piece, and a suspicious sandwich in the same afternoon, leaned away. The ring was ugly. Gold, cracked with age, set with a black stone marked by a symbol Harry did not recognize. It did not glow. It did not whisper. It simply sat there with the dense, unpleasant certainty of an object that had been made important by terrible choices. Harry felt it immediately. The soul fragment inside it was not alive, not fully. It was worse than alive. A piece of Voldemort's soul moved inside the ring like a trapped insect made of smoke and hunger. Thin, furious, afraid, it pressed against the metal, against the stone, against the world. And when Harry looked at it, the fragment looked back. His scar burned, his blood answered. Hermione noticed his hand tighten around his wand. Harry, Dumbledore's eyes lowered to Harry's fingers. You feel it? Harry nodded. Ron swallowed. That's one of them, isn't it? Dumbledore looked tired enough to become part of the house. Yes, Sirius's expression darkened. One of what? Harry looked at Dumbledore. The old wizard gave a small nod, so Harry told them not everything, not every detail of the prophecy, not every private conversation, but enough Horcruxes. Soul fragments, the diary, the ring, Voldemort's terror of death made physical. When he finished, the kitchen was silent. Sirius looked sick. Remus closed his eyes. Ron stared at the ring with open disgust. Hermione had gone very still. "How many?" she asked. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. 7 was likely his intended number, his own soul included. Ron made a strangled noise. 7, diary is gone, Harry said. Ring is here, that leaves... Locket, Hermione said instantly. Cup, something of Ravenclaw or Gryffindor, Nagini possibly, and her eyes moved to Harry's scar. She did not finish, she did not need to. The room changed. Sirius stood so fast his chair fell. No, Dumbledore did not speak. Sirius's face went white. No, absolutely not. Do not look at him like that. Do not even think about looking at him like that. Harry touched his scar. The old lightning mark pulsed faintly under his fingers. He had known, not in words, but he had known since the chamber, since the diary's death brushed against his blood like a black spark begging to be swallowed. Voldemort had left something in him that night at Godric's Hollow. Not only a wound, not only a curse, a piece, a splinter, a mistake. Dumbledore's eyes were full of grief. Harry hated him for that, not because the grief was false, because it was real and still not enough to change the truth. There may be another way, Dumbledore said. Sirius laughed bitterly. There had better be. Harry kept looking at the ring. The thing inside it scratched at the world. His blood wanted to answer, not destroy, consume. That was the danger. That was also the solution. I can take it out, Harry said. Hermione's head snapped toward him. No, Hermione, no. You are not absorbing pieces of Voldemort into yourself based on an instinct. It's not just instinct. Then explain the mechanism. Harry opened his mouth, closed it. Ron gave a weak smile. That means she's serious, mate. Hermione did not smile. Harry looked at Dumbledore. The old wizard's face had gone sharp with terrible understanding. Blood memory, Dumbledore murmured. Your inheritance recognizes soul matter as life residue. That sounds disgusting, Ron said. It is, Harry replied. Dumbledore leaned forward. Harry, what you did to the diary was destruction. What you are suggesting now may be metabolization. Meaning, Sirius demanded. Hermione answered, voice tight. Meaning the Horcrux fragment would not just be destroyed outside him, it would pass through him first. The hunger stirred. The ring's soul fragment pressed against the stone. Harry felt, for one awful moment, how easy it would be. Touch, pull, swallow the darkness, become fuller, become stronger, become more. He stepped back. The room exhaled. No, Hermione said again, softer this time. Harry, no, Harry looked at her. I don't want to. That does not make it safe. I know. Ron stood beside Hermione. We find another way. Harry looked at Dumbledore's blackened hand. How did the other way work? No one answered, because the answer was sitting on Dumbledore's skin, burned, cursed, dying slowly. The ring had nearly killed the greatest wizard alive. Harry could touch it and live. That did not make him lucky, it made him useful, and everyone in the room knew it. That was the ugliest silence. Sirius shook his head. No, we are not doing this. Harry looked at him. If Voldemort keeps those anchors, he comes back, again and again. More people die. Then we find other tools. We will, Hermione said quickly. Basilisk venom. Fiendfire, though dangerous. The sword, if we can access it again. There are options. Harry nodded, but the ring kept calling, not loudly, patiently, like hunger did. They tried other options. Of course they did. Hermione made lists. Ron stole Basilisk Fang fragments from the chamber with Harry's help, which was an adventure neither of them described accurately to Hermione afterward, because the pipe tried to eat us sounded worse than it technically was. Dumbledore used the sword of Gryffindor on the ring. The stone cracked. The curse broke. The Horcrux did not fully. That was the horror. Voldemort's soul fragment had been weakened, wounded, exposed, but not destroyed. It clung to the ring like a parasite with its claws buried deep in reality. Dumbledore stared at it for a long time, then he looked at Harry. Harry looked back. Sirius said, "No." No one had spoken. Sirius said it anyway, but war did not care for clean refusals. A week later, Death Eaters attacked a Muggle neighborhood. 3 days after that, a Ministry transport vanished. Then Amelia Bones was murdered in her own home. The official report called it a duel. Harry read the details and knew better. Voldemort was not only killing, he was testing, spreading fear, measuring responses, searching for bindings old enough to name what Harry was. Harry dreamed of the ring every night. On the 7th night, he woke with his shadow wrapped around his wrist like a cuff, not trapping him, holding him back. That frightened him more than anything. The next morning, he went to the basement kitchen before sunrise. Ron was already there. Sitting beside the ring, wand out, eyes red from lack of sleep, Harry stopped in the doorway. Ron did not look surprised. "I figured," Ron said. Harry walked in slowly. "Figured what?" "That you'd try to sneak down and do something stupid and noble and horrifying before anyone could stop you." "I wasn't sneaking." "You're barefoot." Harry looked down. Ron nodded grimly. "Classic sneaking." Despite everything, Harry almost smiled. Ron stood. "I can't stop you if you really decide." Harry said nothing. Ron's grip tightened on his wand. "But I can stand here and make you look me in the face first." That hurt. Harry wished it did not. Ron continued, voice rough. "You're not a cup for Voldemort's leftovers." "I know." "Do you?" Harry looked at the ring. The soul fragment inside it pulsed. Then he looked at Ron. Ron was afraid. Terrified, actually, but he stood between Harry and the ring anyway. "I don't know how else to end it," Harry said. Ron swallowed. "We wake Hermione, she'll say no. Obviously, that's why we wake her." Harry closed his eyes, then he laughed, quietly, helplessly. Ron stared. "What?" Harry shook his head. "Nothing, you're just very Ron." "Thanks." It was a compliment. Didn't sound like one. It was. They woke Hermione. She shouted for 9 minutes, then she cried for 2, then she built rules. Because Hermione Granger, faced with horror, still believed a system could save someone long enough for love to matter. Rule 1. Harry would never touch a Horcrux alone. Rule 2. Sunlight if possible. Rule 3. Wand in hand before and after, never during. Rule 4. Physical anchors. Ron and Hermione would remain in contact with him unless doing so became dangerous. Rule 5. If Harry's eyes turned red for more than 3 seconds, they stopped. Rule 6. If Harry asked them to run, they would not. Harry objected to that one. Hermione ignored him. Ron said, "You're outvoted." Dumbledore supervised. Sirius refused to watch and then watched anyway from the doorway, pale with fury. Alucard did not appear, but every shadow in the kitchen faced the same direction. East, toward the horizon, toward something waiting beyond daylight. Harry sat at the table. The ring lay before him. Sunrise touched the kitchen windows, weak light. London light, dirty and grey. Enough. Harry held his wand for a moment. He let himself feel the wood, holly, phoenix feather, borrowed language, chosen leash. Then he set it down. The room chilled. His shadow darkened beneath the chair. Hermione took his left hand. Ron gripped his right shoulder. Harry touched the ring. The world opened. The soul fragment screamed, not in pain, in outrage. It tried to show him things. Not memories exactly. Temptations wearing memory's skin. A younger Tom Riddle standing before a mirror, beautiful and brilliant, whispering that greatness was only honesty about superiority. A boy in a cupboard, small and hungry, imagining Vernon Dursley afraid. A graveyard full of kneeling Death Eaters, all waiting for a king. A red castle above a black sea, a throne. Harry's blood rose to meet the fragment. Silver lines spread up his hand. The Horcrux tried to bite. Harry pulled. It came free like a thorn dragged from bone. For 1 second, the fragment hovered between ring and flesh, a black sliver twisting in the air. Hermione gasped. Ron cursed. Harry felt the hunger open its mouth. Mine, no. He closed his fist around the fragment, not to keep it, to crush it. His blood folded inward. The fragment dissolved. Power rushed through him, wrong, sweet, complete. Harry saw too much. Voldemort as a child. Voldemort in the chamber. Voldemort murdering his father. Voldemort splitting himself and calling the wound victory. Harry pulled his hand away from the ring and slammed his palm flat against the table. The wood cracked, his eyes were red. 1, Hermione whispered. 2. Ron's fingers dug into his shoulder hard enough to hurt. 3. Harry grabbed his wand. The red vanished. He collapsed forward, gasping. The ring rolled across the table, empty at last. Sirius made a sound Harry never wanted to hear again. Dumbledore closed his eyes. Hermione held Harry's hand like she could keep him human by refusing to let go. Ron's voice shook. Never doing that again. Harry laughed weakly. No one else did, because they all knew it was a lie. The hunt became a series of wounds. The locket was found in Grimmauld Place, hidden in plain sight among Black family relics and old shame. Regulus Black's story nearly broke Sirius. Not loudly. Sirius had always done loud grief better than quiet grief. But when Creature told them how Regulus had turned against Voldemort, how he had gone to the cave, how he had died trying to steal the locket, Sirius sat in the drawing room afterward and stared at the family tapestry for hours. Harry sat beside him. No words helped, so he offered none. The locket was worse than the ring. The fragment inside had learned patience from being worn close to hatred. It whispered in voices people knew best. To Ron, it whispered that he would always be second. To Hermione, that intelligence could not save those she loved. To Harry, that everyone stayed only because they feared what he might become if abandoned. Harry nearly believed that one. Then Ron, face pale and furious, said, "That thing has no imagination. It's been saying the same rubbish my brain says on bad days." Hermione laughed through tears. Harry destroyed the locket at noon, sitting in a patch of sunlight in the kitchen while Ron and Hermione held him down through the worst of it. His eyes stayed red for 2.5 seconds. Hermione recorded it. Ron called that deeply mental. The cup came next. Gringotts. Break-in dragon. Chaos. Some things were apparently fixed points in the universe. The Lestrange vault was full of gold, cursed copies, and old cruelty. The cup sat among treasures that had never been touched with clean hands. Harry felt it before he saw it. Hufflepuff's cup should have felt warm. It did not. Voldemort had made it cold. That angered Harry more than the ring or locket had. Some objects were made to serve, some to remember, some to gather. A cup was meant to hold and offer. Voldemort had turned it into a hiding place for fear. Harry destroyed it beneath the bank, half in darkness, with goblins shouting above and Ron yelling that this was absolutely not how banking was supposed to work. The fragment inside the cup tried to offer Harry loyalty, not obedience, loyalty. It showed him a world where no one left because they were all inside him, safe forever, carried in blood and shadow beyond death. That was the first one that made Harry cry. Afterward, on the back of the escaping dragon, Hermione held him against the wind while Ron shouted directions neither dragon nor human followed. Harry stared at the sky and wondered how many more pieces of Voldemort he could metabolize before Voldemort stopped feeling foreign. The answer came at Shell Cottage, 3 after the ring, locket, and cup. Harry's shadow no longer behaved in moonlight. Eyes opened without permission, not often, but enough. His reflection sometimes wore expressions he had not chosen. Animals still approached him, but now they lowered their heads before they did. Harry stopped sleeping near other people. Ron noticed. Hermione noticed first. Ron confronted him first. That was usually how it went with emotional disasters. Hermione understood them early. Ron crashed into them directly. "You're doing the thing," Ron said one night. Harry stood near the shore, watching waves break under starlight. "What thing?" "The noble isolation thing." "I'm not." "You're literally standing alone in the dark by the sea." Harry looked at him. Ron shrugged. "Makes my point for me, really." Harry turned back to the water. "I can feel them. The Horcruxes." "What's left after them?" Ron came to stand beside him. The sea wind pulled at their clothes. Harry's voice was quiet, not voices. Not exactly. More like weight. Voldemort broke himself because he was afraid of dying. Every piece carries that fear. I destroy them, but some of the fear passes through first. It leaves fingerprints. Ron was silent for a while, then he said, "Do you want to hurt anyone?" Harry closed his eyes. "Yes." Ron's heartbeat jumped. Harry continued, "Not you, not Hermione, not innocent people, but Death Eaters, Voldemort, Umbridge if she walked up right now and smiled." He laughed once bitterly. "Yes, I want to hurt them. Sometimes I want it so badly it feels honest." Ron swallowed. "Okay." Harry looked at him. Ron's face was pale, but he stayed. "Okay, yeah, okay, you want to, you haven't. That's not enough. Maybe not forever, but for tonight, it's what we've got." Harry stared at him. Ron looked embarrassed. "Hermione would say it better." "No," Harry said. "She'd say it longer." Ron smiled faintly. They stood by the sea until sunrise. Harry's shadow retreated when the first light touched the water. For one more day, that was enough. The diadem was at Hogwarts. Harry knew the moment they returned. The castle had changed under occupation. Snape as headmaster, carrows in the corridors, students whispering like prisoners, portraits pretending not to see so they could witness longer. Hogwarts no longer smelled like school. It smelled like fear. That made Harry angry in a way that frightened even him. The room of requirement opened for them as a hidden refuge, packed with students, blankets, stolen food, and stubborn hope. Neville Longbottom stood at the center of it all, bruised and grinning. "Harry," Neville said. Then he saw Harry properly. The grin faded, not in fear, in understanding that the war had not left any of them unchanged. "You look awful," Neville said. Ron brightened. "That's what I keep telling him." Harry smiled. Hermione hugged Neville hard enough to make him wince. The diadem was hidden in the room's other face, among mountains of lost things. Harry walked through towers of broken furniture and forgotten trophies, feeling the Horcrux pull at him. Ravenclaw's diadem whispered differently. It did not offer power. It offered answers. That was crueler. It showed Harry Dumbledore telling the truth from the beginning. Alucard arriving when Harry was a child. Lily living, James living, a version of Harry untouched by hunger, a version of Harry who never frightened his friends, a version who belonged to himself completely. Harry almost reached for it. Then Hermione said softly, "Harry." The vision cracked. Because in every false answer the diadem offered, Ron and Hermione had been missing, not dead, missing. Because the person who did not suffer as Harry had suffered had never needed them in the same way, never chosen them through fear, never been chosen back. Harry touched the diadem. Liar. The fragment dissolved screaming. His knees hit the floor. His eyes stayed red for 4 seconds. Hermione shouted his name. Ron grabbed his wand and forced it into Harry's hand. The moment Harry's fingers closed around Harley, the leash snapped tight. Harry came back gasping. Too close. That one had been too close. Then the room caught fire. Crabbe's fiendfire roared through the hidden place, monstrous and mindless, a hunger with no restraint at all. Harry saw it and understood with awful clarity what he could become if he ever stopped choosing. Flame serpents devoured towers of objects. Smoke filled the air. Draco screamed. Goyle fell. Crabbe vanished into his own spell. Harry saved Draco because Draco was there, because leaving him would have been easier, because easy was becoming suspicious. They escaped on brooms through smoke and fire. Draco clung to Harry with shaking hands, too terrified to speak. When they landed outside, Draco stumbled away and collapsed. Harry looked at him. For 1 second he saw the boy from the Quidditch pitch again, pale and speechless after seeing the thing behind Harry's eyes. Draco looked up. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Harry was too tired to know which sin Draco meant, so he nodded. It was not forgiveness, but it was something that might someday become less than hatred. Nagini died at dawn. Neville killed her. That mattered too. Voldemort had expected the final pieces of his soul to be destroyed by great powers. Dumbledore, Harry, perhaps Alucard if fear made him irrational enough to intervene. He did not expect Neville Longbottom, bloodied and shaking, to pull Gryffindor's sword from the sorting hat and strike with the courage of a boy everyone had once laughed at. The snake's death moved through the battlefield like a bell. Harry felt the Horcrux fragment vanish. Voldemort felt it too. Across the courtyard, the Dark Lord turned. Their eyes met. Voldemort understood then, all anchors gone. All but one. Harry touched his scar. The battlefield quieted in patches around them, not fully. War never stopped politely. Spells still flew. Stones still fell. People still screamed and fought and dragged the wounded behind cover. But between Harry and Voldemort, a path opened. Dumbledore stood near the broken entrance hole, pale and wounded, leaning on his wand. Alucard stood beyond the far edge of the grounds, not inside the wards, never inside. The sun had risen, and daylight made even him look less like a nightmare and more like a man waiting at the border of a choice. Voldemort raised his wand. His face was no longer calm. All his grandeur had burned away, leaving only rage around terror. "You," he hissed, "you have eaten what was mine." Harry stepped forward. "No," the word carried, not shouted, carried. "I destroyed what you threw away." Voldemort's eyes flashed. "You are a vessel pretending at morality." Harry smiled faintly. That one almost amused him. "You would know." Voldemort's wand hand tightened. Around them, Death Eaters faltered. Students and Order members drew closer. The great hall doors stood open behind Harry, full of the living and the dead, the protected and the lost. Voldemort looked past Harry toward the watching crowd. Then he smiled. It was ugly, triumphant. "You refuse what you are because they are watching." Harry said nothing. "You fear their fear. You fear losing their love. You fear that if they see the truth, they will name you correctly." His voice softened. "Creature." Ron moved. Hermione caught his arm. Harry's shadow stretched behind him. Too many eyes opened. The sun should have suppressed it completely. It did not anymore. Voldemort saw. His smile widened. "Yes, there it is, the inheritance, the appetite, the king under the boy." The air darkened. Harry felt the thing beneath his blood rise like a tide. Stage 4. Not triggered, offered, full release. No life king, every absorbed fragment, every shadow, every life force touched, every ancestral nightmare sleeping in Alucard's line. The battlefield appeared suddenly fragile. He could end it, all of it. Voldemort, Death Eaters, fear, war, the Ministry. Every threat, every future threat, the shadows behind Harry unfolded into impossible depth. For one breath, the outline of a red castle appeared beneath his feet. A black sea roared in the space between heartbeats. Countless eyes opened in the dark, waiting for permission. Ron whispered, "Harry." Hermione's voice followed, breaking but steady. "Wand." Harry looked at his hand. His wand was there. Holly, Phoenix Feather, borrowed magic, chosen leash. He lifted it. The shadows recoiled. Voldemort's face twisted. "Coward." Harry laughed softly. "No." He lowered the wand, not to cast. To point it at himself. Dumbledore understood first. "No," the old wizard whispered. Alucard's smile appeared slowly beyond the wards, not amused, proud. Harry pressed 2 fingers to his scar. The Horcrux fragment inside him squirmed. It had hidden there since Godric's Hollow, wrapped around pain, prophecy, and bloodseal. It was smaller than the others, but deeper, more tangled. Voldemort's accidental anchor, the piece that had made Harry a doorway. Harry reached inward, not with wand magic, not with hunger, with intent. The hardest kind of magic. His blood answered. The scar split open with silver light. Hermione cried out. Ron tried to run forward, but Remus held him back. Harry's shadow screamed without sound. The fragment tore free. A black sliver emerged from Harry's scar, floating above his palm like a dying star. Voldemort staggered. For the first time he looked truly afraid, not of death, of seeing it held by someone else. Harry looked at the fragment. It pulsed weakly, all Voldemort's terror, all his refusal, all the running from the one truth every living thing was born carrying. Harry could consume it, the final piece, the strongest taste, the completion. The no-life king waited. Alucard watched from beyond the wards. Dumbledore watched with tears in his eyes. Ron and Hermione watched like their hearts were being held outside their bodies. Harry closed his fingers around the fragment. Voldemort screamed. "No!" Harry looked at him. "You were afraid of death," Harry said. "So you ran from it." The fragment writhed. "You ran so far you forgot what you were running from." His blood tightened, not feeding, ending. "You broke yourself into pieces to survive." Harry's eyes remained green. "I'm choosing to stay whole." The fragment dissolved. No rush of power came, no sweetness, no completion. Only pain, then silence. Voldemort fell to one knee. His final anchor was gone. The shadows behind Harry collapsed inward, denied their feast. Harry nearly fell with them, but Ron reached him first. Then Hermione, they held him upright. Voldemort rose, trembling with fury. He looked smaller now, still dangerous. Still deadly, but mortal, at last only mortal. You think this makes you human? Voldemort spat. Harry leaned on Ron and Hermione, wand loose in his hand. No, he raised the wand. It makes me not you. Voldemort cast. Avada Kedavra, Harry cast. Expelliarmus, green met red gold one final time. There was no priori incantatum now, no shared blood protection, no hidden anchor. Only a curse cast by a man who feared death, and a disarming spell cast by a boy who had chosen restraint when annihilation was easier. The elder wand, recognizing what Voldemort did not, refused him. The killing curse rebounded. This time, nothing ancient needed to bite it back. Voldemort died like every other man, suddenly, completely. His body struck the stone. No explosion, no shadow, no grand unraveling, just silence. For several seconds, no one moved. Then the battlefield breathed. Afterward, people tried to kneel. Harry hated that most. The first was a second year who had seen too much and misunderstood survival as divinity. He lowered himself near the broken steps, trembling, eyes fixed on Harry's shadow. Harry stepped back so quickly he nearly fell. No, the boy froze. Harry's voice cracked. Don't. The boy began to cry. Ginny Weasley came from nowhere and pulled him up gently. None of that, she said, voice shaking. He's Harry. That helped more than speeches would have. The dead were gathered, the wounded were treated, the great hall became a place of names. Fred Weasley had lost an ear, but not his life in this version, thanks to a shadow familiar Harry had released at the last second during the battle. The familiar had cost Harry badly. He had nearly blacked out from the life force drain. But Fred lived, pale and laughing weakly while George threatened to name the missing chunk of wall after him. Not everyone survived. War demanded payment even when heroes refused the worst bill. Tonks lived, Remus lived, Colin Creevey did not, neither did Lavender Brown. Neither did too many others whose names Harry forced himself to hear. That was part of choosing not to feed, not turning the dead into power, not turning grief into appetite, remembering them as people, not fuel. Alucard did not enter Hogwarts. He remained beyond the wards until sunset. Harry found him there after the bodies were named. The sky was red. For once, Alucard's coat did not look dramatic. It looked like camouflage. Harry stood on one side of the ward boundary. Alucard stood on the other. Neither spoke for a while. Then Alucard said, "You refused." Harry's voice was raw. "Yes, the full invocation." "Yes. Do you know what it cost you?" Harry looked back at the castle. Ron and Hermione stood near the entrance, pretending not to watch. Sirius was with them. Dumbledore, too. Ginny, Neville, Luna, Cedric, the Weasleys, the students, the survivors. "Yes," Harry said. Alucard's smile was unlike any Harry had seen from him. No teeth, no mockery, only something old and wounded and almost gentle. "Good." Harry looked at him. "Are you disappointed?" Alucard laughed softly. "No." "Would you have refused?" "No," Harry nodded. He had known. Alucard stepped closer to the invisible boundary. "That is why you are better." The words struck too deeply. Harry looked away. "I don't feel better." "Good. Feeling righteous after restraint is usually the beginning of another appetite." Harry laughed once, tired and broken. "You're terrible at comfort." "Yes." Alucard reached into his coat and removed an envelope. He placed it at the edge of the wards. The magic allowed it through. Harry picked it up. "When you are tired of pretending," Alucard said, "there is a castle on a cliff." Harry looked at him. "I'm not pretending." Alucard's red eyes softened by a fraction. "Then do not come soon." Harry held the letter. "Will you wait?" Alucard smiled. "I waited 1,000 years for your mother. I can wait a bit longer for you." Then he turned and walked into the dark. This time, Harry did not feel abandoned, only watched over from a distance by something that loved poorly, honestly, and from too far away to burn the world on his behalf. For Alucard, perhaps, that was restraint. The ministry classification hearing lasted 3 hours. Hermione had prepared for 3 weeks. That was why it lasted only 3 hours. Without Hermione, Harry suspected it might have lasted until he turned 30 or ate someone from boredom. Kingsley Shacklebolt, newly appointed minister, looked deeply uncomfortable sitting at the head of the chamber. Amelia Bones was dead, but her final legal notes had survived, and Hermione wielded them like weapons. Harry sat between Sirius and Dumbledore. Ron sat behind him with the expression of someone ready to fight law itself. Alucard did not attend. Everyone was grateful. The final ruling was read aloud in a voice that tried very hard not to tremble. Harry James Potter is hereby recognized as a human legal person of full magical citizenship, with hereditary non-wizard predatory traits classified for archival purposes only. Category 6 designation shall carry no restrictions, ownership claims, creature registry obligations, wand limitations, feeding controls, or ministry guardianship authority. There was a pause. Then, classification name. No life lineage dormant sovereign potential. Ron leaned forward and whispered, "That sounds like a metal band." Harry covered his mouth. Hermione kicked Ron's ankle. Sirius laughed openly. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled for the first time in months. Harry looked at the ministry officials who had spent 2 years deciding whether he was a person and felt, to his own surprise, not anger, only exhaustion and a little amusement. "Human legal personhood maintained," Harry murmured. Ron whispered, "Congratulations, mate, you count." Harry did laugh then, quietly, but enough. Harry returned to Hogwarts for 7th year. People thought this was strange. Harry thought people were strange. Where else would he go? The castle had been wounded, but it was still Hogwarts. Windows had been repaired, stones replaced, portraits rehung. The great hall ceiling showed clear September skies. First years crossed the lake in boats, staring up at the towers with terrified wonder. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table near the window. Sunlight touched his hands. His wand rested in his pocket. His shadow lay under the bench, ordinary for once. Ron sat across from him, complaining about newts before classes had even begun. Hermione had 3 timetables, 2 book lists, and a plan for reasonable academic recovery after wartime disruption that frightened several professors. Cedric returned to complete his final year properly. Draco Malfoy returned too, quieter than before, carrying guilt like an ill-fitting robe. Neville was different now, not louder, stronger. Luna remained Luna, which Harry privately considered one of the war's most important victories. Dumbledore was still headmaster, older, humbler, still dangerous. Still kind, trying. Harry could respect trying. Sometimes that was all survival gave anyone. On the first morning back, an owl delivered a letter with no owl. It appeared beside Harry's plate between one blink and the next. Ron stared. "That is deeply rude." Hermione leaned over. "Is it from him?" Harry opened it. The handwriting was elegant and black. "When you are tired of pretending, I'll be at the castle on the cliff. Don't rush. The sunrise suits you better than you think." No signature. Harry folded the letter. "What does it say?" Ron asked. Harry looked out the window. The sun rose over the grounds, spilling gold over the lake, the forest, the repaired towers, the living school. "Nothing urgent." Hermione smiled faintly. Ron nodded, accepting this with the grace of someone who knew when not to pry. Harry leaned back. For once, the great hall smelled less like hunger. It smelled like toast, ink, old stone, nervous first years, and people beginning again. Later, he went to the astronomy tower alone. The horizon stretched wide and clear. His shadow lengthened behind him. For a moment, as the sun climbed, too many eyes opened in the dark at his feet. Harry looked down. The eyes looked back, waiting, patient, hungry, his inheritance, his blood, his choice. Harry placed one hand on the wand in his pocket. The eyes closed, not because they were defeated, because they were obeyed. Harry watched the sunrise until the light filled the tower. He was not fully human. He was not fully monster. He was not Voldemort, who broke himself to escape death. He was not Alucard, who surrendered so completely to the night that the night learned his name. He was Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the boy who hungered, the boy who chose not to feed. And for that morning, with sunlight on his face and the world still breathing, that was enough.